delay upon delay upon delay. Sorry about the late start. What is it? Nearly 14 minutes in. Shit. Oh, God. That was part of it. The laundry was the other. I actually told you. She's actually my neighbour, so she knows me. I was getting the new coffee cup, which is on the heater. It actually keeps it warm, which is nice. See, that's still warm. I put it on a bit late, which was the only thing. So I had to put out, get the laundry sorted. You know that because I told you that I was in a rush. That's why, remember, you delayed me. You were talking to me on the phone. So don't forget that. Blame Hello Kitty, not me. I'm innocent. Redirect. Blame elsewhere. G'day, Con. Good on you, mate. Just settle in and enjoy the ride. Scotty, how are you, mate? Long time no hear, no see. Paul's back for seconds. G'day, Paul. Good to see you, mate. Oh no, yes. You've been saying that for ages since you've known me. Oh no. Yep. It was partially that. Trying to get it sorted out and getting this plugged in. Because I forgot that's why I didn't use it in the earlier. I forgot to plug it in. So I had to actually recharge the damn thing. So I'll put your comment on. This is my neighbour. Stefan, how are you, mate? And no snow down your way, Harry? No, actually it's been sort of, on the Māori sort of side. We've had ups and downs in terms of the weather. It's been a bit weird. We've had a lot of overcast, on Saturday, the previous Saturday, we had rain. It was just horrendous. It just never stopped all day. So we did get some flooding in the north west of the island, northeast of the island, but it didn't really affect us down here in Hobart, but probably a few places, that were a bit low sea level, like in Kingston, but beyond that, not as much. It was, but it's been pretty bad for Bart. The amount of rain they've had over there in New Zealand has just been horrendous for them. So I took responsibility in the end. Yeah, so it's been a bit weird and strange in that regard, but because we're having a lot of overcast in the evenings, it hasn't been as cold like last winter. We had warmer days, generally, settled days. And then we had colder days and then warmer days and colder days. It was a bit like that. Now we've actually got this sort of situation where we've got warmer days, but really low 3-4 degrees in the morning. So it's a bit on the chilly side. And then in the evenings, if it's going to be overcast, it gets a bit overcast. We have like 7 degrees. And then, because you've got so much cloud cover, you end up with more rain, but also it's warmer for a winter period. So it's been a bit of a strange. We've had the last 3 winters have been very different, one from the other. So, but anyway, has been like that. I remember back in the 80s, we had a bit of ups and downs. Some years that did that, and then in the 90s we had a couple of years that were a bit strange like that. So probably going through a cycle of some sort. Maybe it's a 10-11 year cycle. Some people have talked about in the past these sort of cycles which have to do with sunspots and stuff like that. So probably related to something like that. makes more logical sense. Greetings from the coolest and most rainy Polish of a summer in many years. At least no climate history in the media. Oh yeah, well that's a bonus and all that. I put Northern Europe's had far more rain, and the southern hemispheres also had a bit far more rain. And I actually I know that the climate nutcases say, oh, the poles are a bit warmer and all that, but I've actually, because remember I told you guys about ages ago about the the reason why you're getting those sort of polar vortices changing slightly and all that is because the weakness in the magnetosphere. I'm not saying that we're going to have a magneto reversal, that the magnetic poles are going to reverse, even though they are due. They should have happened quite some time based on historical data. But I suspect we're in that sort of transition where we're going to have, because the North Pole and South Pole have been jumping all over the place, the magnetic North and South Pole. It's sort of settled down a bit, but it's a bit weird. But that's maybe because the inclination is slightly altered in the last couple of years of the planet itself. So that may have also had a bit of an effect. But I would say the patterns are probably more closer to the 11-year cycle. But what you guys are getting and we're getting in terms maybe related to the magnetosphere interacting with the atmosphere. We make out as if we know everything. We know shit. We know hardly anything about these processes. They're so complex, these processes. It would take all the computing power on the whole planet to compute just a few months to work out what's happening over a few months. And you have to have massive capacity to also get all that data to be able to put it in such a system. It's just not practical. So we create flimsy models of which are ideologically driven and just tell us gibberish. So we don't really know, but there are those sort of things that may be related to it. So I'm going to be making a few more videos. I mean, the stuff that I've made about the 550 nanometer sort of green part of the spectrum that influences the climate and influences the clouds and the amount of water vapor that are generated in the clouds. So I've covered some of that and things that don't even exist in the models. It's new science. Climatologists have no idea about it. It was developed at MIT based on a refrigeration technology, but that does happen in the clouds. Even they covered that. But whether it gets cited ever by climate scientists in the next, I'm still waiting. I have not seen yet any climate scientists cite the study from MIT. They'll use it to develop air conditioning and cheaper refrigeration technology. But whether the climate buffoons and so-called gurus look into this and start making proper measurements with aircraft through the clouds to get better measurements, we'll see. Don't hold your breath. Let's put it that way. Especially if it may dethrone carbon from their thinking and just say, well, it's just a natural thing. It's just that extra water vapor from those different frequencies. So, when somebody's job's determined to not really looking into something, that's usually what happens, unfortunately. But at least you're living in Poland where there's less of this nonsense compared to this part of the world. Well, I should take responsibility, should I, for everything? Apparently, I've been told that. Cecile, how are you? And hi, how are you? Watching from East Yorkshire, England. Lovely place. The last time I was in the UK was back in 2000, 19 years ago, basically. Yeah, so it was a long time ago. I'm glad you're enjoying a nice sunny day. In 1984, Tablelands had snow hit them yesterday. As far as the weather, a guy who follows GAN methods predicts that the cyclone that hit Brisbane in March back in November. Well, I'll tell you one thing. We do. I mean, the hottest moment in the last 100 years was in 1935. So we had, from the time we started measuring temperature in the 19th century, when we had the technology, all that was the coldest period in the last 800,000 years. Well, or the period that scientists have measured through geological sort of interpretation, and also ice core data. So when you look at that picture, yeah, it was the coldest point. That's what it was, and then we started measuring it from the lowest point. No wonder it's going up, obviously, because that's just natural variability over. Temperature doesn't change over 1 or 2 years; it changes over hundreds or thousands of years. Even carbon cycles take 600 to 800 years. So anything now to have an effect will take 600 to 800 years, or into the distant future. So all this is just nonsense that these people are making claims where predicting from points. I mean, when back in 1935, temperature was much warmer than today. And if we go the medieval warm period, even warmer, because we know and you go back in the late Roman period, it was also quite warm, and certain vegetables and certain agricultural products were being grown in Britain that you can't grow now. Even it was warmer then, and with modern tech we can't grow them because it's not hot enough. And then you go, Iceland, where the Vikings used to basically grow stuff, and now it's iced over completely. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Archaeological evidence there for anyone to go and see. It was warmer and you could actually grow things. It's just absolute nonsense, the sort of stuff that we're fed nowadays, propaganda. It's just ridiculous. Yes, the CC is a thing, of course, but the forces that, oh yeah, it is, it definitely is. But the forces that shape public. But the thing is, carbon isn't the thing, because carbon basically works in a closed system. When you have when you do an experiment in a closed system, it actually logarithmically you have to double to get 1 degree in a closed system. You have to double each time the actual concentration gradient. That's well known. That's physics. This is why they can't claim, they say, well, it has nothing to do with the logarithmic effect of carbon. It's these feedback loops that are, and you say, well, okay, what are these feedback loops? Oh, we don't really know. It's tightly associated, but it must be related, but we can't prove it because we don't have enough information when you push them, because that's what they're saying. But there are some feedback loops. Well, what about this other feedback loop that about water vapor and these frequencies of light that have nothing to do with carbon and have everything to do with these frequencies and the angle of the Earth towards the sun and these frequencies coming through the atmosphere? Why aren't you investigating that as the thing that can create this variability and all that in increasing water vapor? There's your feedback loop, because you haven't been able to find anything else. And if that's the feedback loop, then pretty much the carbon is innocent, which it is. But in an open system, with a small percentage of the actual atmosphere being carbon, it's just ridiculous. The whole notion is ridiculous. But what can one say? I mean, it's only some scientists that have actually looked at cosmic rays and the relationship with cloud cover and water vapor and stuff like that. All these things, not any of these clowns that are doing models. None of these, because what are models? It's all this rationalist bullshit, like rationalist economics, rationalist scientists, and all that. It's modeling and mathematized knowledge, which means that garbage in, garbage out in your models, garbage in, garbage out in you don't have sufficient data and information to put in that construct. And so your construct is limited to what you can actually compute. So if that's all you've got, that's not an experiment. That's just basically somebody taking stuff, noticing some relationships, and then speculating. That's not science. That's hypothesis at most. It's bullshit in that regard. Thanks, mate. You need to read the paper that talks about cloud cover that drives driver temperature. They still had to say CO2 on the major drive. Cloud cover is determined by those 11-year cycles and the level of cosmic rays that come in. That's what cloud covers do. Clouds are built by cosmic rays, and we're not measuring it properly. And that, I don't know whether they have measured the cloud cover. I have read earlier stuff that some scientists, and there was a not too long ago, a year ago, if that's, it may be the same one that I quoted. This was actually done by an Israeli and a Danish scientist. If that's the one you're talking about, I've already read that and discussed it in the past. But unfortunately, these people, even though the Danish scientist is a well-known leader in physics, and the Israeli also one is a well-known physicist as well, and has got awards and all this sort of stuff. This study going into this, because it was controversial, has slightly affected their professional careers. I wonder why, urine, you know what would be a dream team of for live streams, Bart Harry and Edward Dutton. Okay, probably hardest hitting people I've accepted. That would make a perfect team. Okay, well, maybe we would. You never know. One of these days, you may get your wish. I mean, I've been quite busy back and forth and all that, and so as far as a big name world, I would love Stuart, Roger Penrose, and all. show up, haha, and icing on the cake, mediator, Rupert. Drake, well, I'd like to be there to basically correct Mr. Penrose and actually explain why he's, his cycling universe actually fails certain observations. So yes, since they've all jumped out of the woodworks, I've got a video that I'm going to put on the opinions one for my atheist friends, just to basically give them a bit of stick in terms of some of their belief systems and why they are the atheists of the gaps, sort of reversing the onus on them, why science is pointing in the theist direction, not in their way. So anyway, but that I still need to process. It's at 1 hour 36 minutes, but I haven't actually processed it yet. So yeah, hopefully I'll be able to probably process it this week. If I can process it this week, it'll either be late this week or early next week. We'll see. You got to hear some controversy. There's a bit more controversy from me. You've missed me, haven't you? Now that you know that the heart is not just a pump, do you still not believe in the fourth phase of water? I actually do believe in that water has these certain phases. There's been some recent science in quantum physics in terms of liquid crystals, sort of a phase of liquid crystal phase due to magnetic fields, and the different strength of the magnetic fields affects that. So I don't believe that you could actually get the fourth phase of water in a bottle. That's just bullshit. But can you generate it from magnetic fields within the cellular structure? Possibly. It possibly could. But we haven't done the biophysics to measure it properly to make that determination. So there's still a lot of question marks. It possibly is, because there's new physics that have come in the quantum field that I've been reading, which shows this new state of quantum behavior. So there is a possibility that there could be some validity to it. What people are observing may be related to these quantum effects. It's not very clear yet, or whether it's just part of the cellular mechanics that it actually happens, and it may not be anything which has to do with a quantum effect or a phase of water, but it's just a consequence of the biology interacting with water. I'll give you an example. If you take two metals and take them to space and put them together, they'll fuse together. Why? There's no oxygen. So the oxygen particles can actually create rust or create a change in the surface of those exposed materials. In that regard, those materials are dissimilar now and can't fuse. But if you bring two pieces of metal in space in a vacuum where there is no oxygen to alter their material form, the way they are, the way steel is, in the way it's arranged and all that, when you put two together, they will fuse. That's why they have to create separation with different types of materials, so that doesn't happen. So that's why it's more costly to build space stations and all these sort of things, specialized equipment for space. So if it happens in inorganic material, in an environment inside the body, there are possibilities that the interaction of water molecules under the localized fields that are generated the negative sort of current that it sort of can be generated, especially when you're earthing and stuff like that, there is a potential to modify the behavior of water. That doesn't mean it's another phase of water, but it means that the water may be modified in a sense. And what they haven't done is, when you try to interact with it, it sort of falls apart. We sort of have to find a way to be able to interact with it and find out, is there anything in the water, like is there biological material that could be affecting the type of viscosity, or is it due to the fields affecting the arrangement of the water molecules, the hydrogen ions, or is it some other thing that that's relating to these quantum effect? So it's a hard one, Stefan. It's a hard one. Now, I'm not, taking a scientific approach. I'm not going to jump into speculation. I'm going, it's interesting, but it still needs to be proven by those who are putting it forward. I'm not saying that it's wrong, and I'm not rejecting it. All I'm doing is saying, well, the onus is on the people who are making the claim to demonstrate experimentally that is the case. And what they haven't done is that yet, independently, where it can be independently verified by others. They haven't shown. It's a bit like when we had the cold fusion. Those people weren't prepared to provide the information how to do the experiments. People were doing the experiments saying we weren't funny. And when they were given certain access, they were given limited access, and they could only look, but they couldn't be involved, which some of these people said, well, what have you got to hide? If you've basically found something, you've discovered something, and most people walked away because they'd done slightly similar experiments after that sort of investigation, and they saw that it was more of some sort of chemical process that wasn't properly measured, that was just generating more heat. Why? It's still a bit of a question mark on that. And that's how science is done. You can't just leap of faith. I can understand that somebody who's committed to the work that they've done, they will be true believers in that. But in order to get the rest of us to basically accept what they're saying, they have to demonstrate, repeatability. If you can't repeat science, you can't demonstrate repeatability, you lose me. You do lose me. So feedback loops and frequent oscillations, that's just a statement. Urine, what do you mean? You're going to give me a clear scientific relationship to a specific process in nature? Yes. Yes, we all can make statements. It's a question of whether we can back them up with evidence, and experimental evidence in particular. And it has to be repeatable. That means it can't be one-off and say, well, because time dilation, you can do it over and over again. You can measure the weak nuclear force, a strong nuclear force, and a number of other things. And they've actually done a new MIT experiment on the double slit experiment, that quantum effect. And they've, with this new experiment, it's very fine-tuned. And yes, with a laser, and they've been able to do like single accountancy of photons and atoms to be able to see whether this quantum effect is real in the way it happens. And they've actually been able to confirm that Niels Bohr was right, and sort of Einstein speculations were wrong. Anyway, that's for another day. Get to the queues. Get to the queues. Why do you deem lithium dangerous? Even in amounts 0.51 that can be attained by just drinking certain mineral waters, still don't get it. I'm not saying that it's dangerous. I'm just saying that you shouldn't supplement with it. And in particular, if you're supplementing with it at the same time as you're taking taurine, the problem there is that it can bioaccumulate in your body, and then it can cause brain chemistry imbalances and neurological disturbances. That's what I'm saying. So if you're taking taurine as a supplement, or you're getting a high taurine intake, and you also take some lithium beyond the small trace amounts you'll get from food, then over a long period of time or a short period of time, depending on what the intake is, you could potentially cause yourself problems. That is why I don't recommend it. And since it works on GABA, on GABA-A, and taurine works on the same pathway, I don't see the value of taking lithium when taurine does a better job in a whole lot of other things. So it's unnecessary in that regard. And there is a potential risk if taken incorrectly together with other things that can bioaccumulate it and then create disturbances. That's the reason I don't recommend it, because I don't like putting people at risk. Now, if somebody wants to experiment with low dosing, very low dosing and stuff like that, that's everybody's got the freedom to do whatever they like as far as their own life goes. I don't tell you how to live your life. That's your issue, that you do you. But I won't recommend things which can very easily get people into trouble, especially if I don't know their full story, I'm not aware of their circumstances, and there's a potential risk that they may, let's say, use it in a way that they shouldn't use it. You know what I'm trying to get at? I just don't like putting people at risk. It's really just that, nothing else. It's don't take it the wrong way. I'm just trying to get it down before 7. So time restricted feedings thing. Then well, there was something else that I did want to try and remember now. Eventually it'll come to me anyway. Yeah, so yeah, that's the reason why I wouldn't personally do it, because yeah, there's that sort of risk. And so it's just not a good idea to take risks in that regard. Okay, Harry, I've noticed that supplementing with lithium reduced my deuterium. It makes my body more flexible as a result. Well, I've heard a bit about it, but I haven't really looked into it. So if it, there are claims, but I haven't actually, the reason why is I haven't seen enough evidence. I mean, don't get me wrong, there may be stuff out there, that people have got and all that. But I haven't seen enough evidence. But if it's working for you and you're noticing you're getting less stiffness and stuff like that, well, good for you. That actually may be promising. I may have to take another look and see whether I can find some additional data on it to back up your sort of N of one experience. Interesting. Thanks for sort of letting me know in feedback, because it's important for me to know, because there's a lot of things to investigate. There's thousands of things, and I do geopolitics. I do look into physics and all sorts of areas, and I'm so much involved in so much other stuff that there's only so many hours in the day you can actually focus on most things. So, people bringing things to my attention or putting comments to bring things to my attention is very useful for me to, because I can go and read in a day, 3 or 4, 5, 6 studies, just plow right through them. I'm a bit like that in my personality. So, yeah. Oh, look, I just noticed lithium makes me much more sleepy than taurine. Well, they work on the same pathway. Maybe if you were to take a bit more taurine, you'd because taurine gets used for a lot of biological processes in the body. So if you were to take a bit more, you probably would get more of a sleepy effect. Because I've noticed that myself. If I take less taurine, if I take more taurine, it seems to increase my melatonin levels, and it helps me sleep better. So as well. So maybe the quantity that you're taking may not be sufficient, but I'll just remember that there is a risk. I've brought it to your attention. If it backfires on you in 5, 6 years' time, you've been told. So you could basically cycle, through, and so you can allow the levels to reduce in your body. But I'll leave you to work that out and determine that. And anyway. Imagine modeling the universe in static numbers when the effects of what some models go. They discovered vectors from that could be many light years old, too crazy. It's just too much. There is to try and simulate or to model anything is impossible in that regard. I mean, even in my field in spatial science, to model certain things and to analyze certain things, there is diminishing returns. There's a certain level of accuracy you can get to, and the rest you just accept that it's not going to be the case. So the problem is when people try and actually make decisions off imperfect data is when you get into problems. We get it with vegetation layers and other things. That's why we use an AI trying to reduce the amount of errors, but it actually creates other errors. We've had to fine tune AIs because the problem is they will look at pixels, and they look at pixels. They go, oh, these are all different. So it treats them all different. So you have to basically tell it, no. You're looking at, you need to pull out from the pixels and start looking at shapes and characteristics and stuff like that, and maybe pull some of the satellite data that's in that area that also has sort of wavelengths, and different vegetation have different wavelengths to be able to work out what is what, the differences and all that. So, I mean, they'll get slightly smarter in being able to work out, being guided by humans to be a better analytical tool. What they give you is speed in processing things, that's what they give you. So that's where their advantage is, really. So, but anyway, have you looked into Bill Gates' APL technology? The wildest rumors circulating, harmful or not. Anything that guy gets into, there are a lot of rumors and a lot of question marks on everything. I'm actually going to make a video on there's a German guy that's actually developed an app to analyze all the different products out there, whether they've got insect proteins in them. So, because I know some of you people like to get your low carb keto treats or snack bars, protein bars, with your emulsifier, so you can wreck your digestive tract and all the other nice chemicals. Unlike Dave here, that basically goes to the Balkan regions and enjoys the beautiful cheeses of the mountainous regions in that part of the world. Isn't that right, Dave? Yes, that's a sort of way you need to eat, guys, not through processed snack bars. Yes. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Breakfast Buddy. Yes, please do that. Yeah. Well, obviously, anyone that is on this would have subscribed. Anyone listening who hasn't subscribed yet, well, you can subscribe. Who was just observing, and yes, hit the like button at least. Mate, how are you? DJ Projectus, good to see you. Yes. Well, there's a lot that we have in observational. There's a lot that we have in experimental stuff, and there's a lot of gaps. So the more we observe, the more we research, we generate more questions than we answer. So yes. And not only that, we end up with far too much complexity in what we observe in this universe to be just by chance. But anyway, that's for the other video that will be out. I'll try and get it out. I'm going to do a process run tonight. Hopefully it works. Sometimes it doesn't. So as long as the audio is normalized, I may just release it. We'll see. Do you think the tsunami at Kamchatka was made by HARP? No idea. No idea, to be honest. There has been technology out there that have been used to manipulate the weather, to manipulate environments, to manipulate, we seed clouds to get rain. So, manipulation of the weather environment has been happening for some time. Even in the past, we had situations where the US used certain agents, to cause much more rain in the tropical areas of Vietnam, in order to make it much more difficult for the North Vietnamese who are moving down the Ho Chi Minh Trail to move a lot of supplies. So this isn't new technology. It's been around for some time, in that regard, that there are things that are being done and manipulating our environment. That's definite, because there's a lot of CIA, ex-CIA people that have made it quite clear. There's documents that have come out that have been revealed. There's enough information now to know that there is, but for specific incidences, it's hard to know with certainty. Because if we knew, then the media would be on it and everybody would be pointing fingers. But since we don't have it, we can only speculate. Maybe, maybe not. I would, if it is, you would have to know, or you would, to be able to really argue the point that it's most probable is, you would have to give me a reason why. What's the benefit? What's the geopolitical benefit? And what is the actual economic benefit or military benefit? So you'd have to have one of these three: economic, geopolitical, or military benefit in a war zone. So there'd have to be those three in all that to basically nail it down, from a state actor, that is. From a private actor, that's a different thing. There could be all sorts of crazy ideological reasons why people may do things. You know, we know that people like Billy and Soros and people like that have agendas that they've been pushing. Larry Finn, he's been quite open about it, from BlackRock. He's quite open about his DEI, ESG sort of agenda and all that. So we know that these people exist, and we know they fund things, they push things and all that. So it's quite clear, and even World Economic Forum players like Klaus and many others have quite clearly made certain statements, both on their websites and in literature and in the media, about a number of things. So it's not as if they're hiding. They're being honest. They're just saying, this is what we're funding and this is the agenda we're running. So it's not a conspiracy. They've said it themselves in that regard. And even the word conspiracy is misused, because conspiracy, false information is one thing. Conspiracy is basically something real. It's a legal term. It means that somebody's doing something nefarious behind everybody else's back, and it's been exposed by certain investigations. So the thing is, even language is being misused. Very 1984, when you misuse language and you turn things upside down or back to front. So, but there is definitely quite clearly that, there has been a very long history of geoengineering of very basic levels. Obviously, that would have evolved over time. What exactly they're doing nowadays is hard to know. But when I hear about an incident, I'm always thinking, what's the geopolitics? What's the military objective? And what's the political economic objective for them to do this? And if I can't really find something, I go, well, it's probably a natural thing. So I have to be able to have sufficient, because natural things do happen. They've been happening for a very, very long time. You can jump down the rabbit hole of conspiracy of the so-called, we need to use a different word, of people making up stuff. We can jump down that rabbit hole in that regard, but we have to be very careful, because a lot of people, each time something happens, they'll just blame it on this, like generalize, because it's part of our human nature to generalize. It's all the reptilians, it's all the aliens, it's all this or that. We like to generalize, because even our enemies, it's our enemies' fault. We sort of brand them all together. We lump them all together, our political opponents or whatever. We don't differentiate. We generalize far too much. It's simple. It's very visceral, human, and very tribal. and it's very easy to fall into that trap. So you got to be, you always have to pull yourself back and say, okay, so what's the economic, strategic, political, economic, what are the factors? Can I find other evidence to point that there is, a human motivation behind it? That's how I operate in that regard. And if I can't find one, doesn't mean that it isn't. I just don't have enough evidence to be able to point in that direction. And that's approaching things in a very analytical and scientific approach. It may not satisfy that emotional need that we have as humans, but I'm probably less emotional. Well, maybe it's just my personality, but my sort of view, I'm more interested in the truth. I don't really care about how people feel or about a subject matter or whatever, or their opinions or whatever. They don't give a shit, basically, in that regard. I'm more interested in, is this true or is this wrong, or what it is, and I pursue that rather than dwell on whether it's fashionable or whatever. That's why I don't follow fashions. This crazy approach comes out or that crazy approach comes out. I don't follow anything. You know me. Most of the good people that have known me for some time, that's what very quickly will get you into the crack pottery type world very, very fast. So is lithium or possible other metals intake with taurine, because taurine can improve cellular respiration, thus perhaps allow higher than common levels of metals. Usually with most of the ions, to use a scientific term, so that's what they are, the different metals, your electrons, they're ions. Most of these ions are regulated by taurine through their osmoregulation. So what does that mean? That means in the fluids, it actually can regulate their gradients, their concentration gradients in the different fluids, whether inside the cell or outside the cell in the bloodstream. So that's what taurine does, and will move certain electrolytes to maintain electroneutrality, which is important. So you don't get zap, zap, zap in the body. That doesn't happen. The body has the ability to push these ions back and forward, and it has osmoregulations. Now, taurine isn't the only osmoregulator. There's many others in the body, but it's one of the main ones. So that's why another reason why we synthesize it. But lithium, it behaves a bit differently. It can concentrate in certain tissue type, like the liver and like the brain. And that's where some of the problems lie. Taurine doesn't really regulate it that well. Not that other osmoregulators can't deal with it, but they don't deal with it as well. And it's the reason why even doctors will actually check your blood levels in order to reduce your, if you're bioaccumulating, they'll reduce your blood levels if they've got you on lithium for some neurological reason, and they'll make adjustments, is because it's one of those, I don't know why, it may be the structure of it, that doesn't actually lend itself to being regulated as well as other minerals and other ions. And also some of the pathways in the body, like the detox pathways as well, handle many of these other minerals in a very different way. I talk about manganese as an example. I'll use that, and copper. If you've got a good functioning gallbladder, you can excrete most of it, So it's not only with copper, there's also from the kidneys, but also from the bile. Manganese, on the other hand, which is another, if it's very high, can be neurotoxic. That about what was it again? 90 something percent. I can't remember. 90, at very high levels. It can actually get rid of it through the bile completely, mainly through the bile. So the body has, and for manganese, you need less osmoregulation because it's the liver that manages and gets rid of it in that regard. So it circulates through the bloodstream, coming through the liver. The liver will just push it out into the bile, into the feces and out. That's how it gets rid of it. That's the reason why a lot of vegans and vegetarians who have poor gallbladder function end up with high manganese levels, and they have to do detoxes, which all they should be doing is basically taking TUDCA. Naturopaths usually recommend TUDCA to them. If they consume taurine, because it's a metabolite of taurine, if they consume taurine and they actually ate animal foods, they wouldn't have that problem. Their gallbladder would function properly. But since it's a lose it or use it, they don't use it as much. They end up with these gallbladder problems. They don't get enough choline because it's in animal foods. They don't get taurine, choline. They don't get these things that are very important for proper gallbladder function. And they can end up with manganese toxicity. So not all the ions are regulated by osmolytes. They will be in free form, and they'll be either sorted out by the kidneys or sorted out by the liver. So there are exceptions to every rule, and that's one of the exceptions. And lithium is one of those exceptions, and that's one reason why I have I'm reluctant to recommend it. If people are going to take it, they take it at their own risk. And if they get into trouble, well, can't help you. That's your problem. You can actually get off it and try and detox, and it can take a bit of time, and it can actually cause some disturbances in your anxiety levels, your mental state and all that. And I would rather people just don't take the stuff. I mean, if you want more of the effect, just take more taurine, if you can tolerate it. That's, even very high doses, unless you've got a sulfur issue, it usually isn't a problem for most people. So, what a treat, twice a day. I love your workout, mate. Thanks, Alan. Yes. Anyway, what's your take on bacteria causing issues in the body, like salmonella, for example? Is it salmonella in raw causing issues, or the toxicity of the animal, and so comes to the rescue? Look, salmonella or any pathogenic bacteria that exists in the body within high concentrations can create problems. Like Prevotella. In small amounts, Prevotella doesn't cause any problems. It can actually be beneficial. But when you get too much, it can actually increase certain interleukins. Because remember, the gut microbiome interacts with the immune system, and in the gut is one of the biggest levels of concentration of the areas of concentration of the immune system, because it's at the mucosal layers where everything comes in. That's why it's there. Also your tonsils, another place where your immune system is. So in the mucosal areas is where you've got part of your immune system. So the same thing goes for your other holes in your body. So that regard, we all have, pathogenic bacteria in us and on us as well. But outside certain ranges, then it becomes a problem. So if we use, let's say, on our skin, inappropriate products, we can change the pH of the actual skin, and cause, or let's say you take an alkaline agent and put it on, well, you're going to basically reduce the acid-loving bacteria, the beneficial ones, like lactobacillus and stuff like that. Not a good idea, because in an alkaline environment, a lot of the pathogenic ones grow far more. So in a higher pH, in terms of the skin. So not a good idea. All tissue have specific pHs, like the blood, but all other tissues have, and that affects also which bacteria can colonize those areas or operate in those areas and which can't. So that's another thing that people should be well aware of. When you derange things, you will put yourself at risk in that regard. Let me finish. Oh, sorry. Just let me finish this off. So we're past 7. Done. Bon appetit. Yeah, so as far as salmonella goes, it's one of those, it's a pathogenic bacteria. Not all bacteria are pathogenic. We have benign bacteria that doesn't do anything. We have beneficial bacteria, and we have also pathogenic bacteria. And the same thing with viruses. We have billions of viruses inside us, and the majority of those viruses don't attack us, have nothing to do with us. The immune system doesn't even care about them, and they just attack other organisms, protozoa, bacteria, they've got different competitions. They even compete amongst themselves. So, and we've also got pathogenic bacteria like H. pylori. Now, there's a large proportion of the population that's got H. pylori, but never gets any problems from it. Absolutely none. Because in the stomach, you've got good acidity, and also you're eating animal foods where you're getting taurine, which both tend to suppress H. pylori. So for those people that are on a species-appropriate diet, H. pylori is not a problem. But if it gets, where your proton pumps in the stomach are inhibited in any way, whether from SIBO, bacterial overgrowth, candida overgrowth, poor stomach function, and or taking inappropriate medication to lower your ability to produce sufficient acid in the stomach, all these things can create an environment where candida can take hold and overgrow, and then create problems and create actual damage to the lining of the stomach. So we know it does the damage to the lining of the stomach when it's at a certain concentration, but at a very low concentration, it doesn't. So even pathogenic bacteria will not harm you if they're in check and under control. You can't actually eliminate most pathogenic bacteria inside you. You can hardly get rid of them at all. But what you can do is you can suppress them to a level where they may still have a side benefit by attacking another bacteria, which you need to keep under control as well, because there's a bit of warfare amongst them. And so that can actually have a side benefit, not for an indirect benefit for you. And so that's another thing that we're finding out now, that bacteria are in this sort of arms race and competition amongst themselves. Depending what we eat, we affect the types that grow. So certain pathogenic ones, the more sugar you consume, they tend to grow far more. So probably not a good idea in that regard. So that's important. Sometimes we can lose a number of bacteria, and some people say, well, I've got a sulfur sensitivity. And I say, did you have a sulfur sensitivity before? They go, no, but now I can't eat eggs, as an example. Well, you may have lost certain sulfur degrading bacteria. Now you've got other bacteria that are nasties that were kept under control, but now aren't kept under control because you've got some derangement. We know that in the C19, bio, you know what, WEAPON, that pretty much out of our friends from Wuhan, that can damage and affect negatively the microbiome and reduce bifidobacteria, which is one of the key families between Firmicutes and Bifido. Bifido has to be more than Firmicutes in order to have good homeostasis of view. And then there's all the smaller families like Lactobacillus and many of the other families of different bacterial strains. But the two big ones are Bifido and Firmicutes. Well, when this little spiky friend can really suppress to very low levels Bifido, and that can create a lot of derangements in the actual gut. And a lot of these Bifido ones actually try and keep a lot of these pathogenic under control. So when you don't have them, then you've got issues. So, yeah. So it's a complex picture in that regard. So it's not that salmonella is bad or evil, whatever you want to call it. It's that at a certain concentration, it will be a problem in that regard. And that it's coming to the rescue, I've heard that being said. I remember a naturopath years ago that actually said the salmonella was actually innocent or along those lines. And I actually argued with him and said, provide me the actual evidence for your claim. He couldn't. So I don't know where that myth came from that salmonella is benign. The only difference is that people who have got a good gut microbiome, that don't have any leaky gut, have a good immune system and stuff like that, usually can tolerate a bit of salmonella on food. That's a different thing altogether. And when you've got good levels of like acidity, stomach acidity, you can kill most of it, and then the rest of it will be knocked off by the immune system. So it's less of a problem. And that's why people had less of a problem with salmonella in the past. It's modern humans who've got poorer immune systems, poorer diets and all that are more susceptible. But that's a different issue altogether. But to claim that salmonella is not pathogenic is ridiculous. And I know that some people do. Because that would violate the Bradford Hill criteria. You know, if something is always causal, it must always be, it can't be the opposite. Because it just violates those fundamental principles of, you know, when you're looking at whether something is beyond causal, whether it has a high inference of potential of causality. So to infer causality from a very strong relationship, you really have to nail it down. It has to fulfill these 9 Bradford Hill criteria, and this doesn't. And I'm a stickler for the purity of that approach in the science. And if something does not fulfill that, as far as I'm concerned, it's wrong, or you haven't made you haven't proven your argument. So you may be right, but you haven't proven your argument, and that's important. And I'm not going to accept something that I have no proof. I just go on a belief. You know, well, good luck with that. Should I worry about taurine in my 3-year-old daughter? She's full carnivore with me, but won't eat seafood. Okay, why you won't eat seafood? Well, have you tried? No, taurine won't cause her any problems. Let's put it that way. You know, actually, children get from mother's breast milk a lot of taurine. So for their body size, they actually get more than we get in adults. The reason why they need more taurine is because it actually grows brain cells. You actually get bigger brains as a consequence. So no, it's definitely not. If she's not, you want to give her some supplements, a gram, that's fine, not an issue. So you go right ahead, put in a milk 1 gram, not an issue whatsoever. But yeah, it would be good if you could look. There are ways of actually like you can get different crustaceans to get micronutrients and minerals and stuff like that, and you sort of can cook them in with some dairy products, cream and stuff like that, to give them a bit of creamy flavor. You can do things like that, put a bit of the egg yolk in, which kids tend to like more the taste of it than the white part. So if you sort of combine it like that, it can make it an interesting food for a child. It's just a matter of playing around and seeing whether you can actually combine it in a certain way to get it to eat it. So I know it's hard, with kids, but be a tough dad and grow a spine, mate. And she's 3 years old. She won't remember. Just push it on her. Just spit it out, does she? Modern dads, Stefan, modern dads. But if lithium did backfire on me after some time, would it be reversible? How would it be reversible? Well, if you stop it, eventually it will reduce in your body. Over time. It depends on how much is in your system, how much concentration has been had, and how long it would take to basically eventually reduce out of your system. Eventually it will get excreted, but slowly out of your system. It may take a few months, from when you start having symptoms, and then you'd have less neurological symptoms and all that. I just don't see the value. You look at all, Maasai, look at all these populations, and even populations that have lived over 100 and all that. Do they take any of this? No. Just regular food. As long as you get the garbage out and you can do some biohacks. We don't, I'd rather you basically doubling your dose of taurine and getting both the sleep and also the reduction in senescent cells to basically have less youthful skin, youthful body with consuming more taurine, which reduces oxidative stress throughout the body, including the skin. I'd rather you doing something like that and getting the positive effects of taurine rather than taking something which has some potential risk over time. Thank you, Urine. Yeah, I did reboot my machine, and yeah, that has helped smooth things out. I think sometimes you get artifacts in memory. I had 2 days ago, like my screen went a bit hazy and all that. I realized I had a lot of things open, and I just shut them down, and then I just rebooted and it sort of cleared it all up. So it's sometimes better, because sometimes I forget. I keep it on for ages, for days on end, without sort of restarting it. I just press the button and turn it off, then press the button and turn it back on, and all that out of laziness. But yeah, it's a prudent thing to reboot, just to refresh things. So back to the Balkans and all that fat dairy soon. Okay, so yes. Fair enough. Well, enjoy yourself when you get there. Well, because I know being in Spain, I think aren't you required to sort of for your residency to be there for a certain amount of months? So that's understandable. Nick, I eat 0.7 to 1 kilogram of meat a day at one meal. Still feel hungry after that meal, but if I eat even a little bit of something sweet, I get immediate satiated. Any suggestions how to fix this? Well, what happens when you actually eat something sweet, you're actually causing a slight insulin response. And as a consequence, it's affecting certain other, I forget that there's, what is it called? One's called NPY, and the other one, there's a couple of pathways in the brain that do get affected, that affect the actual appetite. And that signaling, sometimes, for whatever reason, I think it's related to, because to get that sort of satiety signal, sometimes people need to eat a bit more, their requirement. I don't know how big you are, Nick. You may need a bit more. And if you're not having a bit more, you're not getting sufficient insulin response. And you're affecting some of these other pathways. So that is a possibility, that the reason why you're not getting, and by taking some sweet in, you're actually slightly getting a better insulin response. Another way would be to basically just eat a bit more meat in that regard, and then you would get a slightly higher elevated insulin response, which would cover that. Because meat actually, if you look at 100 grams of meat, it actually has a higher insulin response than even pasta. So, it's not that carbs have a higher insulin response, but in relation to certain things, they can. The difference is it just lasts for longer because it stays in the system, that circulating effect. And there's a difference in the way things are broken down from proteins into amino acids and are absorbed in that middle part of the small intestine at a certain rate, which is slower. And so if you consume a bit more, you're pushing against that gradient and tends to basically push a bit higher. But also what I found is that people, I don't know how long you've been on a carnivore diet as well, people in the early stages of a carnivore diet, they may have certain deficiencies. And so because you've got deficiency, you're actually supposed to eat even more in order to basically fix the deficiencies, both protein and micronutrient deficiencies. And then usually you'll find that your appetite starts dropping and your satiety is achieved at a much lower threshold. So it does play a role of where you are. If you're at the early stages of a carnivore diet, this may be that you're not eating enough. You need to eat even more in order to get that satiety signaling, because the body's going, oh, you've just given me what I need. I want more. Give me more. Give me more. And it's encouraging you to give more. By playing around and manipulating hormones, which what you're doing is you're counteracting some of that some of that effect of other pathways and hormones that are geared up to sensing, oh, there are good nutrients coming in to cover our issues here. And so a lot of people find when they come new to the carnivore diet and they've been on a vegan diet or a very poor Western diet and have been deficient for many years to a large extent, they find that they get this like bang, an increase in hunger when they're eating meat. It's because the body wants more. It wants more resources to basically rebuild a whole lot of things and fix things. That's what's happening. Just so you understand what's happening. And a lot of people find that. And then eventually Hello Kitty had it as well. She was just ravenous. And I just said, just keep on eating. Your body needs resources, because she was near vegan at one stage. I used to poke fun at her. But anyway, yeah, she got into pretty much eating more, and now she doesn't eat as much. Her appetite is fulfilled much better, and her body composition is much better. Yes, in all respects. Even the curves are much better than what they used to be, where she was more flat in that regard. So it does work after a while, but if we can derange and mix up the signaling when we do these sort of things, we may say, oh yeah, I feel better for the now, but you may be denying yourself the nutrients that you need to heal faster and improve your body composition in your body. So remember that, because you're actually affecting a whole lot of other pathways when you're throwing something that that's like sugar into the mix and changing the way your body's responding. Hope that makes sense. How can I contact you? I don't do consultancies. I used to, but I nearly got burnt out by doing them. I've got a day job, and it's just impossible to put it in. So what I usually do recommend is people go to Bart K. Yeah, I'd go. There's Bart K. There's people like. I'd also say to you, I'd go to a naturopath and get a lot of blood works done as well, to have some sort of baseline of what the hell's happening. And I'm not talking about LDL cholesterol and that sort of stuff. We're talking about hair mineral analysis to find out whether you've got any mineral deficiencies, and whether you've got any hormonal issues as well, to try and identify whether there's any derangements in hormones and what sort of deficiencies. And Fernando, what sort of diet were you on before? If you're on a vegan diet, it's probably because you depleted yourself and probably created some issues with your thyroid and other things, and that's why you feel like crap. And that means you need to really take the control of your life and start improving your nutrition. You may need more than other people in order to get there. So more nutrient dense stuff. You may be so depleted that you may need to consume crustaceans that have got a lot of minerals in them and high B12. There may be certain genetics that are also affecting you. So that's sort of another thing that you have to sort of look into. Anyway, so if you get a chance, look, leave me a message, a comment, or send me an email. Yeah, I've told people not to send me emails, but send me an email and tell me exactly what your symptoms are, what you know about yourself, and what your past diet was, what your past circumstances, and all that. I'll look into that and give you some ideas. You can play around with it. If that doesn't work, you may have to consult then with somebody like Bart K to try and get to the bottom of it. For certain conditions, I usually say, for generalized carnivore conditions, I usually say Bart. For addictions, I usually say Pim. For body composition, sports, physiology, sort of, bodybuilders and stuff like that, to Jonathan. And for areas like which are with rare disorders and whatever stuff, like Mary Ruddock. She's pretty good at that sort of stuff. Sometimes what I've found from the literature and from my research is that a lot of rare disorders, and I'm not saying you've got a rare disorder, but you may have, that's compounding and complicating things, those sort of rare disorders can be mitigated by pretty much with riboflavin. Riboflavin seems to affect, because what part of the energy pathways, it seems to affect all these different pathways, and it can get depleted under certain circumstances. And I've found that people who have some rare sort of things are not working properly and all that, and it's not only for people with MTHFR, there's for, conditions where people, their skin, they're not processing choline properly. Riboflavin fixes that. A whole lot of neurological diseases, rare disorders, even with MS, there's a relationship with riboflavin. With a lot of different disorders, rare and not so rare disorders, riboflavin seems to be implicated. And once you put enough riboflavin in, and I think it has to do with populations, specifically Europe, certain Central Asian and Northern Asian, which are pastoral, seem to have this same issue because dairy products are very high in riboflavin. So I think there's a relationship there, because populations that are not pastoral have less of these disorders and less problems with riboflavin pathways. So it's a speculative hypothesis on my part. I could be wrong. But what I have found is for rare conditions, when people are really falling apart and all that, you give them riboflavin, a good supplemental dose, and it usually just, they go, well, I feel like a new human. So you could give that a try and see whether it works for you. But send me an email. I'll take it. As I said, nobody else. It's going to be on a case by case. You've told me you're in a really bad state, you're falling apart and all that. There's got to be an issue behind it. So do send me, and I'll see if I can unravel it for you. But the more information you provide me, any tests you've done, so providing me those tests as well, so I can look at them, will give me more of an idea. John, how are you, mate? Oh, look, yeah, it's true. It is. But even though, and it's dangerous as well, because first of all, we've got incomplete science. We don't fully understand how the biosphere works, let alone how to manipulate it. And it's dangerous that there are also individuals out there. I think there needs to be a treaty banning anything until we know more. And a lot of this sort of stuff needs to stop. Unfortunately, like a lot of other things, it's us citizens that have to get up and start saying no to this, and that we should be playing when God with the actual atmosphere, especially when we don't know enough about a lot of things and could make things worse. Once upon a time, they thought that we were heading for an ice age in the 70s as the temperature was coming down from the 1930s, and carbon dioxide was still going up the other way. They weren't correlating then, were they? They ignored that one. And then it went the other way. Oh, yeah, now it's carbon. All of a sudden, carbon does a magical comeback. Sounds ridiculous anyway. But yeah, that's the sort of storyline or the political line. And they were talking about then too that we should put black sort of on the poles. We should put all this black soot. We should cover them so the solar radiation doesn't reflect back, and so we trap more heat and we can warm the planet up. Was the sort of idea that people were pushing out there. But then once things started getting warmer again, the sort of these cycles that do take place, there are sort of a what is it about a sort of a 50 to 70 year cycle. It's about a 60 year sort of more or less in 50 to 60 is usually about around about 50 plus years, somewhere between 50 and 60. This sort of cycle that sort of happens. So we move from between 35 to 85, sort of a 50 year, to sort of late 80s, 53, something like that, approximately. So when things started going the other direction, and now it's global warming, not global cooling. So the same similar crackpots jumped on the new bandwagon and were asking for money for the new problem. Yeah, I just shake my head that the good scientists out there have been suppressed, and they have to wait until they finish their careers before they can say this is all nonsense and argue their point openly. Now they're skeptics. But while they're in academia, they're too scared they're going to lose their grants. And that's why they keep their mouths shut. While the other ones that have got the politicians are covering them, the ideologues, they just shout, scream like mad, like Man and people like that. Crackpots and Anonymous. Yes, unfortunately. Alika, how are you, my dear? Yes, and hello, and hit that like. Everyone. In your previous live, you said more than one may oversee. Yeah, it's like a threshold. 1.1 seems to, it's not going to simulate it for protein synthesis. Not that. That's not what I meant. But it will affect certain pathways, like it will, that are anabolic. So you've got anabolic and catabolic pathways. Like it will, above that, give a bit of mTOR signaling, low grade. mTOR signaling is happening all the time. It's never zero. Insulin is never zero. Glucagon is never zero. None of the hormones are zero. If you were, you're dead. They are all at a different level. At a low level, you're more in a sort of a catabolic state. In a high level, you're more in an anabolic state. Okay, so just let's clarify the hormonal thing. That's why I use the word insulin to glucagon ratio to talk about the amount of insulin in regards to glucagon. So when you're fasting, you've still got insulin in your system, but it's very low, 0.8 to 1. So for one molecule of glucagon, you've got 0.8 of insulin. But if you eat a steak, it goes to 1.3. If you eat a lot of meat, to 1.5. That means you're going to get the insulin will go slightly higher, which is good for your, the kidney thing that Bart talks about, and your glucagon will be slightly low. Now, the concentration of those may be slightly higher in that low carb state, but their ratios are going to be that one's slightly higher than the other in that regard. Where if you eat a potato, like a potato diet, which is still, you can lose weight on a potato diet. It's like a low carb, like a ketogenic diet in the same way, the other way. Your insulin to glucagon will be 4 to 1. And if you're on a sad diet, it can be all the way up to 70, 30, 40, all the way up to 70, depending on what combinations of junk food you're consuming. So you can see the glucagon is nearly in the toilet and insulin is just super sky high. So, and you're in the trough continuously. I mean, you've all experienced it. We've all experienced the glycemic shock every 2-3 hours, and you're actually back in the trough feeding yourself. So, yeah, that is that high insulin to glucagon ratio. So, yeah, it's not completely out of the system, but you still need to have the like AMPK, which is influenced. I'll give you an example. Taurine, when there's a lot of protein in and a lot of anabolic sort of hormones being activated, there's not much leucine in the system. If I throw taurine in there, guess what it does? It actually increases the catabolic pathways. It actually amplifies the sort of the fasting effect. It amplifies that effect. You increase the leucine content, guess what taurine does? The complete opposite. It actually will raise slightly insulin. Complete opposite. So it's like it senses, oh, this is a catabolic state, this is an anabolic state, this is a catabolic state. You know, the body's a very interesting place. This is why you can't go with the reductionist science, because reductionist science will always mess you up, because you say, oh, this does this. Does it? Under what circumstances? You know, this is how the crackpots get caught out. They go, oh, this does this experiment. They go, well, in this other, it does the opposite. So it doesn't really do that, does it? In relation to what? If you're from my sort of background, that's why I think that everybody should do an engineering course before they do any other science, is to understand things from a systems perspective, you know, not looking at systems in a discrete way, in a sort of isolated way. You end up with crackpot thinking, unfortunately. So discard that out of your mind. So it's really that we don't want to get too much signaling, which may poke up some of those anabolic pathways. We want to have less of, we don't want any of that, but we want to affect certain other pathways. One's called Captor 1 and Captor 2. I did promise that I was going to make that video, didn't I? That's the academic Samil that actually came up with that. But if you stick to about no more than 1.1, and I usually do about 0.9 just to be really certain that I'm not going to in any way influence through leucine any of these other hormones. So by having that is enough to affect these two other pathways, but without affecting the anabolic pathways in any way. That's the trick. It's a sweet spot. It's a biohack sweet spot. So, which then certain organelles that are inside the actual cell will go around and do 30% more work. That means 30% more healing. So it's a good biohack to do every morning when you wake up. You have it, you let it go, and it's not a good idea, because remember, you are your body's shot up cortisol very early in the morning to push out a lot of free energy, because it senses the body's waking up. It needs energy to get going, because when you're asleep you need less energy, because you're basically in a sort of like a vegetative state in a sense, and there's less cellular activity requiring more energy substrates. So, but when you wake up, the whole reason for that cortisol spike is to basically push all that out, and also for the insulin that rises also with it. Even though under other circumstances, insulin can counteract cortisol, here they go together in lockstep up. See where the repeat people say, oh, one goes against the other? No, they don't always. The dawn effect, they go together up. Why? Because one's actually pushing out, telling the body, signaling to the body, the body's low on resources. Release glucose, convert glycogen into glucose, release glucose into the bloodstream, release free fatty acids in the bloodstream, so this body can get the energy to start getting the body working and operating, and so he can grab his spear and go out hunting. Got it? Because there's no fridge in the, ancestrally there were no fridges around. Okay, you wake up with a fridge. Okay, you can caress your fridge because you've got a fridge. You consider yourself lucky as a modern person, but they didn't have fridges, so they needed that energy. And then you need also the insulin signaling to drive that stuff into the cells, the glucose that you've just released. Got it? Through the GLUT4 receptor. So that's what happens. So that is why you need that insulin as well in the morning for that purpose. And then if you throw in sugar, like most people do in a bowl in the morning, guess what you do? You just have pushed now both insulin and cortisol even higher. And it will take longer for them to come down, and that spiking will derange, and you'll just feel hungry and crappy all day. And that's what most people do feel. So that's why I ain't good in that regard, So we don't want to do that. So we want, that's, that my break of fast or breakfast is usually at about 11 o'clock, because that's the lowest point, where both insulin and cortisol will be. That's when I have my meal. And it's a high protein meal. So I will have a small snack, which I'll get about 40, 45 grams of protein, some fat and stuff like that. And that will keep me going, satiated all through, the midday. And then in the afternoon, early afternoon, 3 to 4, I usually have my main meal then. And when I'm at home, because I work from home on Mondays and on Wednesdays my main training day, in the afternoon tea time, everybody takes a break. I will take that period and I will exercise then. I'll lift some weights and do some stuff like that. And then after that, not too bad for an old fella, 59. And then after that, I'll have my meal. And I usually start work on that day earlier, deliberately, to be able to then sign off at about 4:30, and then I can have my meal at that time, and I have a big meal then. So that's how I sort of operate. So and then I've got enough hours to digest, and I sleep really easy, and obviously circadian rhythm, all the blue lights and changing the light bulbs helps to reduce the blue light exposure. But I then 5 minutes I'm out, even probably less than 5 minutes when I go to bed. Why? Because and I'll sleep right through for about anywhere between 6.5 to 7.5 hours. It depends how tired I am, how much I've worked, and usually I find that on the weekends I'll sleep more. It's usually after my long walks, I'm a bit more tired and I'll sleep a bit more. So yes, that's how it happens. So we want to get the advantage that in the mornings of just biohacking our not our metabolism, but biohacking our cellular not just merely autophagy, but also cellular cleanup and repair of the internals of the cell. That's why we do these biohacks. So I get about 15 to 20 leucine through diet. Would this cause issues? No, not at all. Leucine isn't a problem. Any excess that you don't use for protein synthesis purposes, it's a ketone. It will be converted to a ketone. Leucine is is one of those amino acids that can be converted to ketones. So, some amino acids can be converted to glucose, and some amino acids can be converted to either ketones or glucose. But leucine is strictly ketone, nothing else. So that's another reason why it's a nice thing to play around with if you want to, put extra for protein synthesis, especially for the elderly who don't eat enough protein to supplement because they need more. But you're getting plenty for your protein synthesis requirements. So I wouldn't really worry, Paul, at all. But yeah, that's a specific biohack. And we need to understand how the hormonal response at a specific intake of a specific nutrient will have a specific effect. And it's the same thing with food. It has a specific effect on glucagon and insulin and many other hormones, specific to not only the exact food type that you're actually putting in, but also the concentration, the amount of that will have a very different effect on the same hormones compared to less or more. And it's the same thing that goes for these single. The body's a very complex environment, you can, all the different nutrients and different things can pull multiple levers at the same time, and you can get all sorts of effect. But one thing we do know is when we look at our N15 data, we can be certain that we are adapted to this way of eating. Yes, I'm really annoyed with this camera. I can't actually adjust it to get my head bigger in the damn thing like I could before. They've actually changed things in StreamYard. I need to go and play around with it. So hopefully next week you'll get a bigger look, a bigger Harry looking on your screen. So yeah, we'll see whether, I just seem like I'm this tiny little head against this big massive bull behind me. It's getting all the notoriety and all the actual looking. How dare it? I don't like the sound of lithium and taurine metabolism. I don't personally either. I'm EMF hypersensitive, so I wonder if it is lithium or simply other metals, because I can hear radio waves oscillations in my head. Well, that's not good. Look, if you've been on lithium before, or if you've taken lithium, I don't know if that's what you're actually saying, but if you combine it with taurine, and I did a video ages ago covering taurine, lithium, and blood pressure meds, but it also goes for things like metformin, because taurine can lower blood sugar, and metformin does it as well. So if you're on blood sugar medication, it can be a problem as well for anyone. So there's a lot of supplements out there that do have pharmacokinetic effects. So that's the behavior of medicine, pharmacology, pharmacokinetics. So that's why doctors have all these books and they can read all that. I go to a specific website, which is a medical website, and I'll go through the different compounds and actually look what sort of drugs do they interact with. So when somebody says I've got certain, I'll go quickly and look and try, like a doctor would, and find the actual compound that because they tell me I'm supplementing this, this, and this, and I'll go and look and see whether there are interactions with any of the medicines they're taking, because that can be an issue, or their fathers or mothers are taking and stuff like that. Because they usually go, "Oh, I took this compound, I feel great. You know, you should take it," but they don't realise that their parent may not respond as well. So, yeah, can be an issue. Let me just go down here. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Thanks for the support. Now, find my... That could be it as well. He may not be eating enough fat as well. If he's eating, if the protein is lean, that could be an issue as well. Good point. Yeah, it does. Taurine has been shown to inhibit telomere loss. Yeah, it does. That's why I said one of the things that lithium is supposedly does, taurine does, and there's actually more valid proof, like experimentation, on these on cells, cell lines and stuff like that, where lithium there's more associated stuff, less experimental, for the reason because it's difficult to do tests, experiments with lithium on humans, which is the problem there, where with taurine it's much safer. Nobody's insufficient with gluconeogenesis. It's demand driven, and the body actually can do it with no problems, unless you have an extremely rare genetic disorder, where certain people, you would know that from birth because you would have major health problems, and most people that have these rare disorders don't live very long. So it's unlikely. I know it's fashionable for people to throw all sorts of things out there, but it also could be, Nick, you may have some underlying mitochondrial damage, because that also can affect how your body works and if it's how it responds. And it may respond better to sugar because you're not as good at utilizing fat because of some mitochondrial insufficiency or damage. I know that some people have had cases where they've had taken antibiotics, certain strains, and they've knocked down, they've damaged specific types in particular that actually have a negative effect on, and I've actually told them about it, and they notice that when they just crashed, their symptoms were really, really poor. And so in that way, taking sugar, obviously, because you don't need the sort of oxidative phosphorylation, you can just ferment it, is much easier than beta oxidation under those circumstances. So, it can become complicated. I don't know, have you done certain antibiotics as well? Because that can be a problem. Do you think it is possible to cure tuberculosis? Just waiting, especially appropriate diet for your body and taking vitamin D instead of using typical antibiotics from the doctor. I think that if you can strengthen your immune system, your body will be able to clear out the tuberculosis. I can see from tribal populations, but how successfully your body can do that, that's a hard one in that regard. But when it comes to TB, a strong immune system is far better. And, if you've got a good vitamin D status, you need to get it into the therapeutic range, as I said. So I've got a video on vitamin D. Just Google it, and I cover it about the levels that you should be aiming for therapeutic reasons and all that. Go and check it out. And taurine plays a big role as well in helping deal with these. The other thing is I'd probably take 1 gram of NAC. Do not take more than 1 gram of NAC, because it can have side effects. But 1 gram is really good for your lungs, in particular. G'day, DC. Back again, mate. We'll have to organise a session for you to come on this channel at some stage. I'm just doing it because it's the first time back, so I'm just going through. I haven't invited anyone. I usually get on the morning one, Lukey to come, Luke Gear to come, and sometimes Jonathan on the evening one. But I haven't invited anyone, so don't take it the wrong way. But I do intend to get you, Jonathan, on the next one. But on this one, because I'm, just getting back and people with a lot of questions, I'll promote it. So people, hopefully will start sharing it around on all the channels, and then we can get a few more people that would sort of turn up and watch. So do it that way. So yeah, thanks for support and thanks for being here as well. Yeah. So you need to get your levels up to that therapeutic level. I would also do a 3-day fast before I pushed my vitamin D levels up there to sort of clear out some of the old damaged senescent cells. You may have some less than enjoyable through that symptoms, but when you come out of it, you start refeeding, and you start building up your new immune cells with taurine protecting them, because taurine can protect immune cells like T lymphocytes in particular from immunosenescence, from damage. So it's really important. And also breath work, that helps as well. Earthing yourself helps as well, is a good strategy to help. But the big ones are TA1 peptide, which helps boost the immune system. It's a peptide you can actually get injectables off the UK peptide site. There's that. The other one is your vitamin D, and the other one is taurine. If you really improve the immune response and function, I believe you can deal with the TB way more effectively. Obviously, if you ask a doctor, they'll probably disagree with me in that regard. So this is not medical advice. But if we look at tribal populations that are on species appropriate diet, have got robust immune systems, good vitamin D status, they tend to basically do much better in their ability to respond to these pathogens. So keep that in mind. Give me a sec. I'm just. What the hell is it doing? No, it's not that study, is it? I think this one's. That's right. It's the. Yeah, this is the old study that I saw years ago, which is on taurine as a treatment for tuberculosis in guinea pigs. That's the one there. That it has an inhibitory effect in that. It's the American Review of Tuberculosis and Pulmonary Diseases. So that was back a study in 1956. So you may want to take that to your doctor. Take a look. Me personally, I'd be on a very high, like 20 grams a day of taurine. I'd be on a high dose if your body can tolerate it. But start low amounts and increase. But yeah, I would definitely try and get my vitamin D levels up, get TAB peptide to increase to help support that increased proliferation of T lymphocytes, to be able to go out there and the natural killer cells and hunt them down and take out the TB disease. Yeah, that is an animal model. We don't have human trials. Unfortunately, at that time, this is 56, antibiotics had just come out of the Second World War. They were very popular. People just gave up on every other option other than antibiotics. So it's the way most therapies went in that period onwards. And nobody ever looked at any of these other compounds. So, if you ask now a modern doctor, that may have looked at a lot of literature in tuberculosis, they'll say, oh, there's associations with certain compounds, but none of them have actually looked at these old studies. I just remembered it, and that's why I tried to Google it, trying to find the damn thing. But yeah, so there is definitely some relationship there with it's applicable to humans, mammal. Yeah, anyway, that's the sort of line I'm thinking. Look, statins are just basically a mitochondrial poison. They, in terms of the pathways to synthesize a number of compounds, not only coenzyme Q10, but a number of other compounds, they interfere with all that pathway. So it has negative consequences. I mean, coenzyme Q10 is a very important thing. When I was taking statins after my heart attack in my mid-40s, I did actually read up on some of the Japanese research, and they recommended with statins to take coenzyme Q10, and I did take ubiquinol, which is the active form, the reduced form, which is sort of the one that sort of the active reduced form, because as you get older, it's, well, that's what they were saying, that it's, we're not as efficient. Maybe if you're getting it from food, it's different, but nobody's ever studied it, so hard to actually really say. But yeah, hopefully that study will convince you that it's a good idea. The problem is that back then there was just limited research. Obviously there should have been better follow-ons, but to do proper studies and in any meaningful way, it's really important that there is more research into humans, just finding volunteers and stuff like that. I find the biggest problem with modern medicine is that they have no issue whatsoever. This is how crazy it is. They have no issue investigating any drug, even though some of these drugs can sometimes kill people, and they'll put people on trials, and they have no issue with experimenting on humans with pharmaceuticals. But if you tell them for some compound that is in the world and all that to investigate it, no, or vitamin D or whatever, no, we're not going to do that. It's too dangerous and all that. You go, are you kidding me? People have died from many of these other things. It's crazy. The sort of nonsense that exists out there. But, what can you do? It is what it is. Anyway, let's move on. I'm waffling. What's Stephen asking? When I cook meat for an hour and eat this soup as part of the GAPS diet recommended by Mary Ruddock too, I get diarrhea. How could this be explained as I said, to be super gut friendly? Hard to say, Stephanus. I've not really. I never investigated the GAPS diet, so I just don't know enough to comment about the GAPS diet in this way. I know that soup shouldn't cause any problems. That doesn't really make sense. Too much fat, if it's rendered fat, can cause diarrhea. Does this soup that you're making have a lot of rendered fat? So if you're cooking meat for many hours, it's going to alter the fats and make them more into a rendered fat, similar to a rendered fat. And that could be the reason. I can't think of anything else, but it could be the enhancing the changing the composition of the fatty acids, breaking them down too much and altering them in the way that when you actually take and cook fat and all that, that's how they create rendered fat. If you're doing it for many hours, technically the meat fat should become rendered in a sense. So if you're getting too much rendered fat, that can cause diarrhea. That's well known. So that's the only thing I can think of. A free taurine. How do I become an infant again? Freaking hell. You should be taken out and given a good hiding. Your father should have given you a good hiding. Be respectful of women's breasts. Yes, I can sympathise. Yeah. Oh, God, it's on the same subject matter. I better move on. What's else we're talking about? Okay. Oh, from that crack, but gosh, yeah, he's a bit all out there. He would have had good stomach acid, and probably that's why it wasn't an issue for him. But he had no science or any knowledge or stuff. Some of the stuff that he was arguing was baseless in that regard. But if you've got a good, robust immune system, a healthy microbiome and all that, it's less of a problem. Yeah. So, yeah, he made a lot of different claims, but never could provide any proof for them. That's the thing. G'day, Billy. How are you, mate? Good to, yeah, thanks for some of the comments you've left me in the recent past, interacting with some of my posts. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Oh, I wouldn't say infinite knowledge, no. Plenty, yes, but not infinite. Yes. We haven't got to the deity yet. Thankfully. Saying that many supplements on Amazon are fakes. Is iHerb better, I hope? I've always, when it comes to powders, usually there's not a problem. Like free form, there's only like in most of the free form taurine is not going to be an issue because actually there's only one factory in America that produces it. So the companies that have got a contract get it, and there's a factory in also in Germany that also produces it. With taurine coming out of China is the biggest problem. So anything that's actually made in China or a product of China, some companies do the right thing, some companies don't. That's where you got the problem. So it's hard to know. But I know that the suppliers, the US supply companies like Now, like most of the others that are getting it from the same corporate that produces it for all these, because all these brands they just have contracts with this company, this manufacturer. So that's where the other company that I used to recommend, that the earlier free form, they don't call it free form anymore because it isn't, because they're sourcing it from China. They took over a lot of their supply around the COVID period, they were able to, a bit after the COVID period, when, with the change of government and the sort of ideas that, to pivot manufacturing back to the US by the US administration, there was sort of pressure from the first Trump administration, then from the second, and many of the number of these supplement manufacturers have come back to the US for their sourcing. So it's actually slightly better that they're getting it sourced, because there is sort of a bit of a oversight in terms of certain legislation. So it's actually slightly better. But as long as it's coming from those sort of sources. Now, some of the other stuff, especially a lot of the, from Asia, not that I'm bagging Asia, but I'm just saying that from there, some of the there are no legislation. It's like cowboy country. There's no legislation of consumer protection much in Asia. That's where the problem lies. So it depends on where you're sourcing it, which is the biggest problem. So I do look at sourcing in that regard. So, and Amazon does have issues with a lot of stuff that's coming out of Asia because it's cheaper. That's why they put it on their sites. Part of the problem. And there's Jonathan. Hello to you as well, mate. Yeah, it's more indirect. And also you're probably noticing they did actually, there was some recent research that actually showed that really it doesn't really have as much of an effect on protein synthesis. It's sort of marginal. What it can do is it can hold on to more fluids in the actual muscles, which makes them look bulkier. That doesn't necessarily mean that you've actually got more muscle fibers. You've just got a bit more bulk, because it can actually retain some water in those cells. But it does seem to have some neurological benefits and benefits in the brain and some other tissues. So it's not bad. It's, since it has some other benefits, but I wouldn't put it down to protein synthesis in that regard. Yeah, leucine is still the main player in that sort of realm. Oh, Lilith is here as well. G'day, Lilith. Who else is here? Tregan. G'day, Tregan. Anyone else? That's about it. Yes, I'm behind as usual. I had a better pace this morning. Anyway, you guys ask too many questions. That's the other thing. he's putting some ready for red lambs as for reptiles in the apartment in winter. Good idea. Look, I have in the evening all my lights, most of them are red lights, near infrared type. And yeah, it is in terms of if you're outside, you would be bathed in near infrared light. The way the wavelengths wrap around the globe, that it's those near infrared that are radiating off the planet and interacting with the atmosphere. And it's those that are more pronounced in the evening. So that's actually good for circadian rhythms as well. And even when you've got a fire, like a wood fire and all that, you're getting a lot of those red, near infrared type light frequencies, which those type of photons in those sort of ranges, where they have a circadian benefit in that regard. So yeah, it is a good idea, because in winter most of the evening comes early, the darkness and all that. So it's actually a good thing, because it's way too cold outside. So in that regard. I think a health question. It may impact the mental health of Tasmania. Should the new AFL stadium in Hobart go ahead? Yeah, it's going to cost about, well, some people are speculating it's going to cost about 1.86 billion. I think a lot of that money could be spent way better. There is another oval in North Hobart where I live in there. They could potentially have bought some of the properties next door, shut one of those roads, and potentially built the stadium around that, as stages, and it would cost far less, and it would liberate a lot of that money to be used for other purposes. I'd rather have a big southern outlet from Kingston to the northern suburbs, rather than having a whole lot of log trucks and other vehicles coming from the southern part of Kingston and those sort of areas, coming straight into the city and going through the centre of the city. Certain hours it's just like a massive traffic jam. Nothing moves, and if there's an accident on the bridge, it's basically horrendous. So talk about poor management and utilisation of money. So no, I'm not a big supporter of the actual AFL stadium, to be honest. I think I'm not against having a stadium having a local team in that regard, as long as it's economically viable. But I think it's a bad idea to be throwing that amount of money around. It's just, you'll end up with another white elephant. I think it's much smarter to utilise the existing grounds and upgrade it in stages, which will be more economical if you do it over 5 years, with the government contributing a few, 100 million every year, and the AFL, you could basically do the upgrade to the existing oval and do it within those sort of budgetary constraints. You're going to have, you're having a whole lot of talks about budgetary constraints, and then on the other hand, they can find all this money to splash around. It's ridiculous. Certain friends may need the contracts to make a bit of dosh. Yes, unfortunately, that's how it goes. Up syndrome, you understand that. Making a bit of dosh on the side. Money in the bag. Yes. Saw an article that there would be a shortage of milk if climate change gets worse. What, the cows are going to go on strike? I mean, who makes up this shit? Since dairy cows don't do well in very hot temperature. What hot temperature? Are they kidding me? The cows in with a Maasai, they're in basically in semi-arid deserts. Are they? These people are just crazy. Have they ever met a cow? Have they talked to a cow? They probably have. And the cow told them to take a hike. Where do they get this shit? I mean, I think just people just make up shit and dribble. And it's actually disrespectful to most intelligent people. And I think that a large proportion of the population, there may be a few dummies here at the extremities and very smart people, extremely smart people at the other extremities. The majority of people are somewhere in the middle. I'm sort of above average. Everybody else is somewhere in the middle here. They can understand, most things in that regard. But I think that the way they treat people is just this. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of mindless dribble coming out of the media. And you're right, Jonathan. It is exactly that. But it also shows a level of, not only forget about arrogance, but absolutely, disrespect and condescension towards the average person. And they wonder why people have switched off and they're going to social media, going to platforms like YouTube or other places, and are not listening to, the TV, bullshit of the mass media type thing. The reason is because they got nothing to offer other than just absolute nonsense. It's just ridiculous. They're trying to take out raw milk here in the EU. I'm not surprised with little Nazis like Vonda Nutcase and like. What do you expect? It's you got all these crazies that are running the EU. Yeah. They want to start a war with Russia. They're all just insane. The amount of absolute nonsense is just crazy out there. It's just, all that Carlos from which Baltic state does she come from? She basically wants to start World War III. I mean, how insane can you be? It's just, rather than focusing on people's problems in trying to actually improve energy security for the European people, a better economy, which is falling apart. It's just madness. Absolutely madness. Yeah. What can one say? Why has my chat box go to the private, go back to the other one, goes to the bottom, freeze it all up. Don't know why it's doing that. It's a bit annoying. I thought rebooting would fix it. Anyway, well, maybe a today thing, because we had that earlier in the first live stream earlier today where it sort of froze, and that was a StreamYard things, and then it just went back to normal. It was just like a glitch. Yes, I was transformed into slow-moving creature from the Tasmanian lagoon. Yes. Let's go down. I'm bypassing everybody. Get a bit further down. Get further down. Further down. Oh, who are you criticizing? Like, yeah, it's a small head. Luckily, I didn't say it in relation to the other joke. Then it would be a problem. Do you use Sci-Hub? Yes, I do. But I do have also an account with Academia, so I can get stuff from there as well. So if it's not available here, I can get it. So I only use that if I can't get it from some of the other sources that I've got access, and also Geo Australia, which is sort of because being with anybody who's like in my field of the spatial science field, we're connected. We've got an account, so I can actually access certain studies that they publish or put up on their website, so I can get access to them, which is useful. That's how I got some of these studies on some of the climate stuff and whatever else. I was able to download it from there because it's not always on Sci-Hub, which can be useful if you're trying to find it outside a paywall, as you can understand. But usually I can find it from those other sources. But yes, it is something that I do dwell in when I have to, when I've got no other option. That's usually some of the old studies that are not available anymore. You can sometimes find it on that site, like some old 50s and 60s studies. You try and find it and you get no links. You go there and you actually find somebody created an old connection to some old PDF that was scanned years ago by somebody. So it can be useful. Yeah, well, me and Jonathan would do other things, so as I said, I do want to do the next live stream for the Eurasia one and try and get Jonathan and DC as well. So I just have to make sure that on the day that David and Jonathan are available. So it'll be critical to make sure, and then we can organise something there together. I would like to get Bart back onto my morning one in the morning, and I don't think I'll have a problem getting Lukey from Brazil. He'd come on easy. But whether Bart's available, I know he's up to his eyeballs with all the issues that he's got on his farm at the moment. So, even when I do throw suggestions, he emails me back and goes, he'll show me a sort of a whole area that's basically, because he actually showed me some images, some maps of his property and the areas that got affected and all that. So, yeah, he's had a lot of issues in a lot of places. So he's just hoping that once this is over, obviously it's costly to do a lot of mitigation things, but if you can do small things over time, which are affordable and things. But the funny thing is it may never happen again. That may be a one-off, this thing happen, and it may take another 100 years beyond his life. So he won't even get the benefit of any mitigation. So it's crazy. I think he's trying to restore the bridge currently because, the bridge was severed, their connection to the outside world. So they can't even drive out at the moment. So it's a bit of a problem for them. Yeah. So as long as the house is safe, that's the main thing. They do have some places in the shed and stuff like that, but yeah, the house was the biggest concern because of some of the erosion that happened. But yeah, hopefully things have improved and will give them a bit of an opportunity to stabilize. That would be the area that I would stabilize the most around the house. That would be the most critical part, and getting the bridge sorted so you can actually get out, so you can drive out of the property, because obviously they'll need to get certain things. So yeah. Okay. I've never heard of it, like excess collagen causing. There are some supplements that do have collagen in them that can cause a few disturbances in the gut. Okay, so that's a bit of. I still think it's the rend. It's the many hours, and maybe it could be a combination. Possibly, you could play around removing that and seeing whether that has an effect, and then at least you know, yep, that was the issue. Or you can lower the amount of rendered fat that's in there, so sort of separating, and focusing on cooking the leaner parts, and then putting in the fat at a later stage in the cooking process, so you don't end up with that sort of rendered effect. Or changing slightly the composition of your soup and seeing how that works. And obviously I'd also get back to Mary and actually have a bit of a chat with her, because she would have more experience with people doing the GAPS diet, which I don't. That's not an area that I've sort of specialized in. And so, I'd be picking her brains to find out why you're reacting the way you are as well. Chronic low blood sugar on a carnivore diet. Any ideas? Have ketones, but also hypoglycemic symptoms. Glycine raises it. Well, it's probably because of your mitochondrial problems, I would say. That's more of the reason behind it than anything else. So if glycine is helping in that regard, keep on using it. But I would say, because you know your condition, we've talked about it before, and I would say that because of the underlying mitochondrial damage that you had, and you still probably have a certain level, that does affect the sort of, you don't have the sort of general normal sort of functioning mitochondria and energy production inside the cell. So that's part of it. So you'll utilize more of the sugar substrates than, because of the inefficiency of the oxidative phosphorylation mechanisms. And so that will push things further down. So by adding that, you're able to get the machinery in there to produce a bit more lactate and glucose, and that's what's happening. So it's probably a safer way, because it's going to be a lower deuterium source that you're getting compared to eating raw sugar, which is going to be higher in deuterium. So it's probably going to be more negative for your mitochondria in that regard. But that's because you've got mitochondrial problems from your own health issues that you've had. So without going into details, and I would say that's probably your biggest driver. A lot of people will have strange effects in terms of the type of gluconeogenesis that they can do, the type of functioning, because remember, through some of those machinery, those enzymes, through those pathways within the Krebs cycle itself and all that, you're actually synthesizing a whole lot of things, in terms of aminos and in terms of other precursors. So that, if part of that machinery is compromised, other things will tend to be a bit slightly more prioritized. And so if you're utilizing certain substrates more than others, then the body will tend to lean on those in that regard. So it's an issue that can take up to, as I said, up to a decade. If you've got a certain level of mitochondrial damage, to turn over the cells and improve what you've ended up with can take a certain length of time to clear out a lot of the damage and replace it with better cellular function, cells, mitochondria, and so on. So yeah, it sucks to be you. It's just is what it is. Same thing with me. It took me about a decade to get rid of all my fibrosis out of my heart, and then out of my lungs to reduce it to, I think now it's probably cleared out. My doctor said, do you want to go and do this? I said, no, I'm not going to bother irradiating myself. I said it came down in 9 years down to 19% for my lung from being completely glassed and fearing cancer. Then pretty much once they actually, the 2019 scan, down to 19%, pretty much gone. So why radiate myself again? So I didn't bother. Since I've noticed, I've got, since 2019, my ability to jog up to from the second floor up to the 9th floor is actually even better than it used to be back in 2019, which means that my lungs have improved even more compared to then. So it's probably resolved the whole problem anyway. I mean, back when I had my heart condition and even after the operation, all that, a few years after, I was still very unfit and all that. Even going up one flight of stairs, I was just buggered, let alone doing what I'm doing now. So it's a complete transformation. It's funny that they won't, my cardiologist basically has discharged me. Doesn't even want to know me anymore. It's crazy because I shouldn't be cured. I should be getting chronically worse, and I don't fit the profile. So what they're saying, I said, look, I've done these lifestyle changes. Because initially I didn't say anything because I didn't want to create tension, but at the later stage when I actually explained what I did, it was sort of more nodding. It wasn't like, it was sort of, yeah, fine, thanks for telling us, but we don't really want to know. The cognitive dissonance, the attitude and all that was just, and I go, do I need to come back here? And he goes, nah, you're fine. You don't need to come back here. Eventually, if whatever you're doing seems to be working, your lungs will clear up even better, unless it gets worse, only then come back. It never did, so I never went back. It's crazy that unless you're sick, they don't really want to know you after that. Goodbye. So not that I don't really care. Fine, I don't need to be within the medical system. I don't need to cost the taxpayer any money since I don't need them. Yes, Jonathan, yes. Mindless dribble is exactly. Yes, a bit of that. And yes, obviously. And the imperial political families. Yes, all those lovely people. What I call elected aristocracy. That's what politicians are, elected aristocracy who think they can tell us how to live our lives. But they've convinced us that we need them. And when people argue to me, if you allow the simple people to do it, it would all fall apart. That's what people think because they've been brainwashed so much. And I do remind them that humans when we use our just basic common sense, we can smell a rat. We can see when something is bullshit, you know? And I go, let me just give you an example. There were 2 years, a number of years back, there were 2 years in Belgium, there was no government. The bureaucracy was just running everything. Guess what? In those 2 years, the government actually, without a government, the country actually had a better surplus, and actually did economically and socially much better, just by having the bureaucrats just run the, just the general day-to-day administration, without them poking and changing anything and disturbing things, just letting it flow, So what are we paying for then, if they can't do it better than not being there? Ancient Athens, they built an empire on citizens directly. There were still, government officials and bureaucrats and a prime minister equivalent who was, I think it was 3 months. In Switzerland, where they adopted a similar direct democracy style, sort of quasi, from the first leader of the Greeks, Kapodistria. He was also the foreign minister of Russia, and he actually ended up in Switzerland, and he actually established the direct democracy for the Swiss and prevented a civil war as well amongst them. Then ended up in Greece, and we Greeks, basically our first leader, we knocked him off. Well, our elites, financial elites, with the British knocked him off, but that's another story. He actually gave all his wealth to the Greeks to basically help them to create, and he wanted to create a direct democracy to educate the people, bring them up to a certain standard, and build a modern Greek state. But foreign powers didn't want that, because one was enough in Switzerland. More of that would basically threaten the established order. So that's why he got knocked off. Plus, he wouldn't take orders from the British. 2 sins. Yep, that's what cost him his head in the end. But they built an empire with direct democracy. So to say that people aren't sensible is nonsense. We have a saying in Australia, the pub test. Does it pass the pub test? That means, does something that people are stating, does it actually, people can sense when there's bullshit around. When people are peddling contradictions and bullshit, like politicians do. They'll say one thing and then they'll do a backflip and say the complete opposite in the same sentence. People notice this bullshit. They may not know the details because they're not specialists in that area. They don't have expertise, but they can sense there's something bullshitty about it. And that's a good thing that humans have that capability. All humans have that. That's why you don't have to be in the field to know that somebody is actually saying half-truths, because the way they say things, that's really, really important. But that's what we get from the sort of globalist elites that we have, that have only one thing in mind. They don't want independent societies. They want societies that are controlled, told what to do. I'm not against the rules-based order. Actually, I think that some of the things of West that we support as Westerners, a rules-based order system, is a really good thing. It basically reduces the tension between nations, and it also says to nations, be respectful and be, where the borders lie, don't threaten another person, and all that sort of stuff. But the problem is that the, US elites, the British elites and all that, they say this sort of stuff, but they do the complete opposite. like they'll attack Iran. Well, that's a violation of international law. They haven't declared war on Iran. So Trump didn't go to the Congress and ask for a declaration of war against Iran. Iran wasn't threatening the United States. He violated Article 2, Paragraph 4 by threatening, first of all, Iran, and then violated Article 51 of the UN, which America is a signatory, and attacked. And then he claims that Russia has done a violation of international law when, you know, they've actually violated the same rules. And I'm going, really? Are you joking? So one rule for one person, one rule for another? And at the end of the day, the Germans are even more arrogant with the current leader, you know, in the sort of bellicose sort of stuff. Because the whole agreement that Kohl signed with Gorbachev at the time is that Germany would be united and NATO would not move eastward. That was the agreement. So German unity and Russia withdrawing all its troops out of Eastern Europe, because it didn't have to. It had agreements, even if the governments had been changed or whatever, those governments still had agreements with the Soviet Union. He could have kept his troops in there on their land. They couldn't do anything about it. What are they going to do? Fight them? So the whole agreement was, we will pull back and you guys won't move forward. And we will allow you to unify, you know, Germany. So that was the agreement. And obviously the French, they demanded, because they didn't want a strong Deutschmark or a strong Germany, they demanded that Germany should join the Euro zone as part of them agreeing. Because remember, after the Second World War, there were, you know, 4 occupying powers. Even though Germany and East Germany were quasi-free within their spheres, there were still occupation troops, French, American, Russian, and British, on German soil. In order for the status to change and Germany to be unified and all that, they all had to agree, because that was part of the old agreements and signatures that had been signed from Potsdam onwards. So they still had a say, and the French demanded that Germany comes into the Eurozone. You know, so there were all these things. So these were agreements. Who violated most of these agreements? The West, not the East, the West. You know, so, and why? I mean, Russia wanted to join NATO. Russia wanted to get into the European Union. Russia wanted to do that. They actually believe that, you know, what they didn't realize is that the British and the Americans, they don't want the Germans, the Russians, or anyone basically in their club. They have the Five Eyes, Canada, you know, all the British speaking, the English speaking, including Australia, where I am at. That's a club, and this club is the one that's going to dominate the world in their thinking. That's how they operate. They've just replaced the old British Empire with the Anglo-American Empire. And that's how they've operated since the end of World War, or after the 1990s. Some people are waking up to realizing that, and some people in America are also waking up to realize that it's costing them far too much. That's how the British Empire collapsed, the French and all that. What? Overextending themselves, getting into too much debt, getting into, you know, because the British, their living standards have declined. The French, their living standards have declined, most of Europe and all that. Militarism in the end, you know, like with the Roman Empire and all that, it allows these elites to basically make shitloads of money by ripping off others. That's really what it's all about. you're used as cannon fodder for those assholes to grab like BlackRock and all that, to grab all these resources around the place, break up all these countries like Ukraine, like Russia, like all these Middle Eastern or whatever, and then come in and just grab all their oil and all that, export it out, and get their friends in Syria to export the oil out and get it from there. Or this has been happening for a long time. This is how these groups operate. They'll cover it that they don't care about people. Christians in Syria being slaughtered. Orthodox Christians like myself, many of them also Greek Orthodox. Nobody cares about them. And the people that are slaughtering them are being accepted in the West, and Trump thinks Jelani is a great guy, the Syrian, top bloke, strong, tough bloke, and he's slaughtering Christians. Oh, he loves Christians, doesn't he? That's what I'm saying. I've lost a lot of respect for Trump because of my people being slaughtered in Syria. Greek Orthodox people are being slaughtered, and he's doing nothing for them because it's all geopolitics. How can they basically get rid of the Russians from there, get rid of Bashar al-Assad, who was the only person that was protecting all these minorities against the jihadis? He may have been he wasn't a Democrat, I can tell you. But he wasn't basically a murderous thug like the current jihadis are that are being supported by Turkey and the US and are slaughtering people. So I've got zero respect for these people. And I think people in the West need to wake up, because what we're having, we're being used and all that. I'm not saying that the Russians aren't doing nefarious things. Yes, they are. The Chinese aren't doing nefarious things. Yes, they are. Everybody is. Nobody's a saint in this planet. But there was also opportunities for a new relationship to be emerged. Putin tried many times and was rebuffed by the West. So if somebody's to blame for the bad relationship between Russia and the West, it's the West, not Russia. They're the innocent party here that have been screwed and then threatened with dismemberment of their country. If the Russians had troops on the Mexican front and were trying to pushing people in to try and break up America, the Americans wouldn't be happy about that. They'd be invading Mexico the next day. You know it. In your deepest hearts of hearts, you know it. And that's really the problem in that area. Nobody's a saint on this planet, and there are, if you scratch any people, you will find some level of revisionism. All of us, even myself. I would like to see a greater Greece, personally. Territories that we once had, to get them back. But I'm, what I like and what is right is a different thing altogether, if you're trying to get my drift. But on the one hand, I would like, if in an imaginary fantasy world, but realistically, I realize that that's got really deleterious consequences, and a lot of people would die. So that's why I wouldn't push for that. But it's one thing to desire it. That if you go and touch any population in the world, they would desire to have some of their ancestral or lands they once possessed. That's the reality. But the reality is, if you can reduce tension, that's a better strategy. But I don't see the West reducing tension. I mean, Trump has got an ego out of control, and he's just pushed things up and, created even greater tension in that regard. So I thought he was going to push a more peace, a pro-peace thing, but it seems like he's become, a little bitch for the globalists, and pretty much is, being told what to do. And I can't understand why. I mean, it's not as if he's going to get re-elected. So what is the purpose of this? His vice president is not even heard anymore. He's been sidetracked, sidelined, because he does disagree with some of these things. Tulsi, you don't even hear of her. She's gone quiet as well because she disagrees as well. So you hardly hear of her. And it seems the Lindsey Graham has got far more effect on him, even though he was an opponent of him in the past. So that's even, I scratch my head and go, what the hell? It doesn't make sense. And the last thing the United States needs is a conflict on two fronts. I don't know what's going through his mind, or, you know, whether it's, I know that he's got a big ego, and he doesn't want to lose. He's got this arrogance, doesn't want to lose. And I think these people are manipulating that part of his personality. It seems like from the outside. I don't know whether it's that, or whether basically he was always a globalist and we just got tricked. Don't know. Hard to say. But this isn't normal to basically be elected with one agenda, saying certain things that you would do and then do the complete opposite. Putin told him quite clearly. He said, we had an agreement. This was the agreement, that these things would happen for us to basically stop. You guys lied last time. You guys called to have these meetings, the Minsk agreements and all that. And then behind our back, you were organizing the Ukrainians to attack us. So you lied to us. And Merkel basically said it openly. She basically spilt the beans first. You know, the previous German chancellor. So it was quite clear what was happening in that part. But did he criticize them in the way they conducted themselves? No. He's pointing the finger at Putin, who hasn't changed his message at all. It's been the same thing. This is, you agreed to this, we go back to this agreement, and we get a deal done. They go, no. Well, if Zelensky says no, well, who am I negotiating with? Uncle Sam? Uncle Sam says, I want to be I want to be basically neutral. Well, you're not neutral, first of all. How can you be? This is, I don't know, it's a clown show. It just sounds like a clown show. I would say to the Russians, keep on fighting. You know, in the end, they will sort them out on the battlefront, because that's what I would do. In the end, there's you know, if people are unwilling to come to some arrangement, sorry about going off the rails. It's a sensitive area. It gets me really riled up and annoyed at the way, you know, we didn't need a war in Central Europe, basically, and so many people to die. There's probably been like 1.8 million Orthodox Christian people that have died for no good damn reason, just for a couple of globalists to weaken Russia and rip off their resources in Eastern Europe. So I'm pissed about it in that regard, because a lot of people have died for no good reason whatsoever. Anyway, let's move back to the, sorry for going off the tangent. I'm just very annoyed about that sort of stuff. I had better hopes, and we're close to a nuclear war. I mean, this is crazy. Why would you send 2 nuclear missiles very close to Russian territory, which creates the threat of a first strike? What do you think the Russians are going to do? They're going to respond to that. They have to, for their own security, and send out a number of additional nuclear weapon carrying submarines. You know, one mistake and we're all blown to kingdom come. How friggin' crazy is that? Would it be wise for someone in their 20s to take either nattokinase, lubricase? Out of those three, I would only take lubricase if I was going to take for anything. For general health, no, for general health, you don't need it. It can help with. The good thing about lubricase is it has some anti-cancer properties. It has some, cellular cleanup properties. It has a lot of good things about it. It doesn't only clear out Mr. Spiky, but it actually does a lot of other cleanup throughout the body, in joints and all sorts of things. And the nice thing is it doesn't react with any meds or other supplements. And also it doesn't create risk like nattokinase can, depending on people's genetics and certain things, can create a slightly more risk in terms of things like bleeding. So it'd be a thing that I would not take long term at all. It is cheaper than lumbrokinase, but lumbrokinase is far more efficacious if you were going to take it for sort of cleanup. But, I mean, do you know that you've actually got plaque buildup in that regard? First of all, I wouldn't take anything until I knew whether I had plaque buildup or stable plaque. If you've got unstable plaque, I would focus on vitamin D and dairy in that regard to try and actually get more calcium in to calcify and stabilize. Your CAC score will go up, but that's fine. That just means more stable plaque. And then once that's the atheroma will cover the injury area, that will actually heal, and then cleaning up a bit like a scab, cleaning up the scab inside the arterial wall with using things like this, K2 and stuff like that. Then you can actually first stabilize and then clean out. I have done on it's called calcification friend or foe. There's a video, if you check that out, it covers and explains that, actually shows some of the research as well to back up what I'm saying. So, yeah. Yes, it is horrendous what is happening there. Jelani, the murderous thug that the West has befriended, so ridiculous. The Orange Man. Yeah, well, yeah. Really, I had great hopes and they've been dashed. Maybe the best thing they could have done is taken a bullet, at least with the current vice president, who seems to be less of a warmonger. We may have had a better result. Yes. General supplementary recommendation beyond taurine, meat and eggs. It's really just that is, you can, depending on your circumstances, I don't know how old you are and all that, the vasodilation, you can take a bit of citrulline, but I'd actually take it in the morning with that biohack, a bit of leucine, about 0.9 grams, just slightly less. If you get one of those little 1 gram little sticks, and you just make sure that it's just slightly below the top, that will end up being about 0.9. You put that in a glass. You put in 2 to 3 grams of citrulline. It's good also for nitric oxide, but you may want to, you don't need about, even 2 is fine. you can keep the one for the evening to get a bit of vasodilation later on. You can go up to 6. So let's say, I don't know, if you're male and you want to do a bit of hanky-panky, it does really help down there. So 30 minutes before, if you take 6 grams, yep, things can be really good in that regard. So yes, fairly good. A bit like that little pill, the blue one, but without the side effects. So that's a sort of a thing. Also down there, you can actually get like in the arterial walls in the heart, you can actually get sort of plaquing and also some calcification. That can also affect the functioning in that regard. There is a method of using this sonic thing. You can actually buy a sonic device. There is sonic therapy that can break those things down and clear them out. So there's, and then with the vasodilator, citrulline, pretty good. Sex advice, bloody hell. What I've descended to, Yes. Trying to help my fellow man get in direction. So that'd be probably one that I'd consider in that combination in the morning, then 11 o'clock break your fast, or your time restricted feeding, which is what really it is. And so, I wouldn't really bother with many other things in that regard. If you've got, let's say you get a lot of mucus or whatever stuff like that, you're prone to that sort of stuff, you could consider something like 1 gram of NAC. If you don't, I wouldn't bother. I don't. My father does, who tends to, it helps his respiratory system work better. He tends to get a bit of mucus build up in his lungs, so it helps clear all that out. So he basically functions much better. The sort of in winter and towards the beginning of spring and the latter part of autumn, but mostly the beginning of spring. It's usually about 5-6 months that I usually take vitamin. It depends on how much outdoors and stuff like that I'll take 5,000 IUs of vitamin D3. Make sure you don't get a seed oil one. If you're going to get anything in it, make sure it's either MCT or coconut oil, because if it's MCT, it's even the safest because it's medium chain triglycerides. They're all saturated. You're not going to get anything degrading in a sense. It's clearly just to reduce aldehydes and peroxidation products, like primary, secondary oxidative products in the actual supplement. So there are some brands that actually have like in a chalk, the vitamin D in a chalk type thing. It's not very clear how well they absorb. That's the only thing. Obviously, you need fat with it, with a meal, but whether that chalk stuff interferes, I haven't really found any studies that actually have really looked at that. So I don't really know. Nobody really knows. But I tend to go for, Dad's on a liposomal, I'm just on a regular sort of one which has got medium chain triglycerides, coconut oil in it, and stick to that. So these are options in that regard. But if you're in a warm climate like Luke is in Brazil, I'd be out sunbaking every day. I wouldn't bother supplementing at all. Depends where you are on the planet. I'm in Tasmania, which is, we get hardly any UV in the winter months at all, and that's when I primarily have it. And Dad, because he's got his kidney cancer, has reduced, but it's just reducing slowly. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't do a low carb ketogenic diet or anything like that. He does eat more animal foods. He's reduced his plant foods, but it's just, I'm not going to change him because, he's probably going to die from it, with it, rather than from it. So I sort of just focus on giving them nutrients that will back him up and all that. And because, he doesn't wear shorts, he just wears his regular clothing all year round and all that. He just may wear a jacket in the winter, and in the summertime he'll just wear a shirt with a light coat on, in that regard. Old fashioned in that the way he is. So he's getting less, even when he's out he's wearing trousers, regular trousers, and long sleeve and stuff like that, so it doesn't get burnt. I'm not going to argue with him. So I just got him on 5,000 IUs, and he tends to basically maintain about 170 plus. Last time was 180 something millimoles, and it came down a bit, then it went up again. So it sort of jumps, on average, it's around about 185, slightly lower than that or slightly above that, towards the 90s, and back towards that in millimoles. So, which is, usually, what is it, the above 70, in the sort of 80 nanograms. So that's what the sort of area that he sort of gravitates around is. Oops. Oh, come on. You damn thing. Just, okay. It's just, it gets grabbed, unfortunately. Sorry about that. It's just, I don't know why it's actually, absolutely. Yes. That lovely lady. Yes. Look. Yes, very much true. Look, I don't think they had much of an option. If they had, probably there was an independent then, the current Secretary for Health, JFK Jr., he was probably, he does carry some leftist type baggage, which is a problem, but at least he would have been, less of a warmonger and less of a problem. Maybe they could have, with somebody like that, there could have been a possibility of an international agreement, some sort of thing that between Russia, the US, and China, to create some sort of new accord to reduce tensions and conflict amongst them. Some sort of new Bretton Woods conference, or some sort of an international agreement to reduce this sort of escalating tension that is dangerous, because it reminds me a bit of pre-World War I recklessness, where people were just completely reckless. So in the Second World War, it was, Nazi Germany revenge for what had happened. But before the World War I, which is very similar to what we are, a lot of bellicose politicians were stoking the fire of conflict, constantly, muscling up. And it's the same sort of, you just go back and do the research, guys. Don't listen to me. I could be talking bullshit. Go back and look at what politicians were saying in France, in Britain, in Germany, in many parts of Europe before the First World War. And you will see very much similarities in the sort of language. Reckless, rhetoric, like it's, you know, it's not going to lead to anything, sort of like throwing it to the wind, you know, caution to the wind at all. That is exactly what we were getting before World War One. And if you would ask people whether there would be a massive European war before World War One, they would have told you you're talking nonsense. You know, once things get going, things really get going. You know, that level when you get to that threshold and you tip over that threshold, and then it gains a momentum of its own. You no longer can control it. Nobody can control it. It gets a momentum, and we're getting close to that point. And that's why I'm concerned so much, that it's bloody hell risky and dangerous. The behavior, some of the Western leaders have just lost the plot. Their language is just off the show. It's not logical. It's not normal behavior, especially the hypocrisy of things that they have done in the terms of violation of international law and behavior around the world for decades. And now they're lecturing some of these countries. I'm not, as I said, I criticized the invasion from the beginning. I understood why it happened, because they saw it, the Russians saw it as an existential threat to their security, like America would do the same thing if Mexico was considering getting into an alliance with China or Russia. What do you think the US would do to Mexico? They'd be invading the next day. You know it. We all know it. They'd be doing that. I mean, little Grenada tried to go the other way and they invaded immediately. The reason why they can't invade Cuba is because in order to get the missiles out, they had to sign a treaty and an agreement. And that goes into, when America signs treaties, it goes into US law. So they can't touch them. If they could, they would. And you know it. But they had no treaty barring them from Grenada, did they? No. So, you know, we all know that if Mexico had gone in an alliance with China or Russia, the Americans would be, the next day they'd be invading. Everybody knows that. We're not stupid. They would invade, and they would say that this is an existential threat to us, that this, affects our security. And they wouldn't be making the claims that they are making now, that Ukraine has got a right to independently do. Well, actually, no, because the Ukraine is a product of the dissolution of the Soviet Union. It never signed an agreement on the territorial bounds between the two countries. You know that all countries have boundaries, borders and all that are signed between, because the countries have fought and they've redrawn the borders, and then there's a treaty like the Paris Agreement, the Lausanne Agreement, all these agreements signed where the borders are and stuff like that. Well, because these countries dissolved like that in an illegal way, because it was a Soviet Union, they dissolved it, the states, they weren't given independence. They actually just took it. It's a bit like Texas basically breaking away from the Union, or Florida breaking away. That's an illegal act, in a sense. But they could do it. But then there could be border disputes with the other states, even if the whole nation broke apart into different states, border disputes, because they'll say, well, we dispute those boundaries. They were a product of a previous state that doesn't exist anymore. So they're, in a sense, a lot of the border sort of related things of that entity are very fluid because they're not covered by treaties or signed. Now, these countries could have basically said, we want to secure our borders and make sure they're defined properly. We'll sign an agreement of a non-aggression, or that will peacefully coexist in a neutral status. They wouldn't be affected at all. And as I said last time in one of my other videos, we could quite easily, Trump could have quite easily said to the Russians, look, let's make both Belarusia and the Ukraine neutral states, big buffer states. We'll have a big distance away from you. You'll have a big distance away from us. And that will actually lower the tension and guarantee better security for both sides in that regard. That could have happened. Why hasn't it happened? Is because, it's, I want to win. The other ones have got a justification for wanting to win because it's an existential threat for them. What's the security issue for America? It's not an existential threat. It doesn't affect American security. So why are they getting all wound up? Why did they even start all this? It's a Biden, Obama-Biden sort of agenda that was actually started. So why is he basically running a Biden Obama agenda against Russia? It just doesn't make sense. It's just really damn weird, to say the least. Also, vitamin D supplement, that sometimes like 10,000. I wouldn't go that high at all. Yeah, you'd need far more magnesium than normal. Stick to around about the 5. Most of the research that I've looked at, around 5,000 I use, between, for women, 3,000 I use to maybe 4 if they're doing it for limited months. And for men, especially if you're larger or taller, then consider 5 or 4 if you're a more, slightly smaller sized or whatever. So that's the sort of level that I would stick. At that sort of level, even for vitamin A is fine. You'd never get any toxicity, any problems whatsoever. Your body can process it, any excess. Your bile will excrete any excess retinol at those sort of levels. You can even go up to about 7. Remember that guy that did the eggs every day, 24 to 30 eggs occasionally? He was doing about 6,800 to 7,200 IUs. Not a problem at all, by eating multiple eggs, because he had an addiction to eggs. But not an issue. So I would say don't go over 10, definitely, but I'd say stick to half that. You still, my dad does all year round 5,000 IUs, and pretty much maintains in that therapeutic level. So if he had taken higher, he'd probably get into hypervitaminosis. So I don't think, for limited periods, if you want to increase the level of the amount of stored vitamin D, yes, it can be useful. Especially if you're coming from a low level, you could even take more than that for a short period of time, for a couple of months, to bring up your levels and go and check yourself. But I wouldn't do it as a regular thing at that level. I'd stick to safer levels, which are 5,000. And in that regard, you wouldn't need even to supplement a whole lot of cofactors like magnesium and many other things. You'd get enough from the diet. So, yeah, play it safe. There's no need unless you're trying to fix a deficiency. And then I wouldn't actually even go to 10,000 IUs. I'd get the active form and do a week's of the active form dose, and that would get my levels up fast, because that gets it up in a couple of days. I usually eat ground beef and eggs since it's cheap, but my mood when I eat more steak is so much better. It feels like the lights come on every time. What am I missing? Well, you're missing nothing if it's working for you in that regard. And the amino acid and fatty acid profile of a steak is better, stick to a steak. So there's no problems. I mean, I've noticed, look, I have noticed with some of the Chinese people that are subscribers to mine, people that have come from Inner Manchuria, from the northern parts, that had, a culture of dairy and a culture of eating like horse meat and stuff like that, they tend to do much better on beef. Where the southern Chinese, Cantonese and people like that, they tend to do better on things like pork, eggs, chickens, things like that. They, and they enjoy that much better as well. There's obviously, in the last couple of thousand years, certain adaptations to certain types of animal foods, and they do have slightly different profiles in their micronutrients. And if you've got certain adaptations, that actually has a bit of an effect. It's like, choline synthesis in the Han Chinese. Europeans, they have to get it from the diet. Han Chinese, because of the severe, long periods of being vegetarian, they actually had to endogenously improve the synthesis of choline. So these slight variations that exist between different ethnic groups that are part of what I call the people of the domestication of animals and plants. So those people have slightly varied adaptations compared to tribal people. So, everybody does well on a steak. On other types of variations, it can vary quite a bit. Now, you did actually say ground beef. Now, ground beef obviously can have slightly, depending on the way it's been processed, it can have slightly less protein and also slightly less of certain micronutrients that can be lost in the process, especially if it's not done there from fresh meat. It's packaged. So yeah, I would, you'd probably notice that the profile in terms of certain types of key components that is in meat, that maybe they'll be lesser in ground beef. That may be an issue for you. I just noticed that. I should have focused on that a bit more. So that could be the thing you're missing. But there's also these variations from different parts of the world. It's like salicylate sensitivities. Not a problem in my part of the world, but definitely a problem further north. I enjoy, my key meats are lamb and pork. That's what I enjoy the most. I do pork belly once a week as well. I enjoy that. But beef, I don't really enjoy that much, to be honest. Beef patties, yep. But, I find very bland and very unsatisfying. Again, that north-south, where people from Northern Europe tend to consume more, they would have consumed horse meat, bison, the sort of, those sort of type of wild, similar to bison type of wild sort of cattle. So they tend to have better adaptations to that type of animal foods. So there are these slight differences in that regard. There's vegans complaining about no K1 on a carnivore diet, only K2. Actually, there is K1. It's much smaller, but there is K1 in animal foods. So, yeah, there is. Plus, the liver can synthesize different menaquinones and alter them and all that, if it needs a bit more of one or the other. So, and also some of the gut bacteria can utilize some of the amino acids and can produce some of the K1 as well. So I don't know. It's just ignorance on their part. I think I actually showed, I'm trying to remember now, there was one video that I actually showed the different menaquinones and K1 in different animal foods. I just cannot remember what video it was. It may have had MK4 or something like that in the name of it. Google it with my name. You may find something which I cover and show some of these lists and all that. Most of the menaquinones, including K1 in the liver, will prioritize the conversion of all this sort of stuff. So any excess K1 in the liver will get converted to menaquinone 4, which is the animal form of vitamin K2, and it's the one that can actually directly interact with our DNA. So that is, so even if you get other menaquinones like menaquinone 7, 9, 8, there's a whole lot of menaquinones. So even if you get any of these from, in particular, you find the varied ones in dairy, less in meats. You'll find very small amounts of some of the menaquinones in meats. Mostly MK, the thing that you'll find the most is menaquinone 4, MK4, and some K1. And the other menaquinones, it depends on what the animal is eating and all that. You'll find very little of that, sometimes just trace amounts. It's mostly in the dairy products where it's actually, and that's primarily due to certain bacterial strains, that's actually, these are extra menaquinones are created. But when they get into the body, they go to the liver and they all get converted to menaquinone 4 because that's what the body uses. Now, in terms of K1, the body only needs a small amount for clotting factors. And so that's why people on land, the people that have, the carnivores that have the biggest issue with slow clotting, they do get some, is the Inuit. Like traditional Inuit would consume like 70%. So you got on the one hand, and that's why they had a bit bleeding issues. On the one hand, they get a lot of omega-3s. And on the other hand, they also got very little of K1. They would get from the caribou that get some K1, but from seals and other animals, they'd get next to none or very little in that regard. So they had a slight, it wasn't enough to cause any real problems for them. It just meant that their clotting factors were slightly poorer compared to any. But anyone that's eating a ruminant animal, they will get far more K1. It's just if you're eating fish. So if you're doing let's say you were doing a carnivore fish diet, then potentially you could become deficient or have very low levels of K1 and possibly have less clotting factors in your system. So you may not be able to clot as well, or when you get an injury, you may bleed longer, stuff like that. But we're not talking about horrendous things here. But that doesn't happen with regular carnivores that are eating ruminant animals and they're getting within the fats of the animals a certain level of K1, which comes from the plants that they're eating. So less of a problem. It's more to do with certain types of animal foods like seafood and seals as well. Aquatic animals have slightly less. But yeah, and that's the other reason why there are variations between the Inuit on the ice. They notice that they have they can bleed for longer compared to the Inuit on the mainland, like in Canada, mainland Canada, where they consume more caribou, and they would get more K1 from the caribou meat. So there's these variations in that sense. Yeah. How to survive the heat. The heat? What heat? On Carnivore. The summer has been abnormally hot in the region, and I can't eat that much meat. Carnivore adds extra heat. Look, I tend in the summer months, I tend to eat. I still eat some meat, but like smaller portions, and I tend to also combine more seafood through that period. Squid, octopus, so. But if you're also doing taurine, taurine actually increases through the brown adipose tissue. It increases the amount of warming. So in the summer period, if you're in a hot climate, you may have to consider cutting out taurine for that period or going to a lower dose. If you're doing higher dose, especially over 3 grams, you will get more uncoupling of your brown adipose tissue and more growth of your brown adipose tissue. So that will actually also warm you up in that regard. So that's 2 issues there. And also because the other thing that is important is if you, like before somebody, obviously you don't want to be eating grounded beef, but you can actually make your own. So if you buy steaks and then create your own grounded beef at home and all that, and then when you make it, cook it, you're going to lose less nutrients that way. And that's another way of sort of going down that pathway of actually, and it's lighter to basically consume. Scrambled eggs are also very easy, as a food. There are different meat varieties that can actually you can consume as well. Lamb tends to be a bit lighter and has less of that that thermic effect compared to beef. So you can try a few other different meats and see how you actually feel with those. So I'd play around a bit. Yes, definitely. It does. In ghee, butter versus eggs, I only eat lean beef, ghee, and eggs. Ghee and eggs, they have K1 and K2. So so you'll get in that regards. The egg is a good source of K1. That is true. So there are sources for K1 in animal foods and all that. It's just, as I said, seafood can be a bit problematic, and so can certain types of cuts of meat. Oh, Christina, how are you? It's a long time. I never was notified. Yeah, well, that's YouTubia for you. So wonderful to see you back. Hello, everyone. Well, it's good to hear from you as well. Anyway, we're at the end because I've got work. It's 10 o'clock here, and I've got work tomorrow. And so I'm going to call it quits. We've gone on now for about 4 hours. So nearly 4 hours. So it's, well, slightly less because I had a bit of a delay sorting out my coffee plus sorting out my laundry. So yeah, oops. I actually, I even blamed my neighbour who called me and we were chatting about something. So yeah, oh well, had to blame someone. You're welcome, mate. Dave, cheers, and you're welcome as well. Anyway, guys, that's about it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your support. Please like this video. Please, push it out, share it around some of my content, other content. I've got a whole lot of playlists. Just go through the playlists, look at the different playlists. I cover all sorts of things. There's the myths and falsehoods of veganism. There's carnivore controversies. There's a whole lot of things that I cover, different subject matters. Some older videos which cover on, methylation issues that people have, like MTHFR, how to correct those sort of things. So there's a lot of information. There's well over 500 videos. So go and check them out. And it's probably easier to navigate through the playlists and, find what you want. Even the cancer one, it can be useful for people because it covers some senolytics, how to use them properly, like Pfizer, how to use it in order to get an advantage to clear out damaged cells out of your body. Even if you don't have cancer, it can be useful to basically, rejuvenate your body with healthier cells. So do look into it. I will roll back to the very beginning of your stuff meeting. God bless you as well. Have a good, and have also GB Genesis. Have a good night. Thanks, you too. God bless you as well. And thanks for your support, and thanks, for such a nice welcome from everyone, both in the morning and in the evening. Hopefully, as people pick up on this, check out, get some notifications here or there that start popping up. Hopefully, YouTubia hasn't been as friendly. When you have a bit of a delay, you've been off for a while, then you come back on. It's not as, the algorithm isn't as helpful. So hopefully, things will start picking up again, because I've got now double the subscribers, and in the past I had like 40 or 50 or 60 people watching a live stream when I had half the subscribers. So, obviously people may not know that I'm back. If Christine didn't get a notification, probably many others as well. What can you do? It's just is what it is with YouTubia. Yep. Thanks, mate. That's kind of you to say that. Thank you, and thanks, Lilith. And I'm out of here. See yous.